Following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, GB News can exclusively reveal that 6 Tory candidates are on the verge of sensationally defecting to the Reform Party. This spells a huge headache for Rishi Sunak ahead of tonight's first live TV debates. We'll bring you all the latest and all the inside information. And this comes as the Tories of today pledge to deliver what David Cameron promised in 2010 to cap legal immigration levels. But with migration levels rising, is this too little, too late? And all 27 European Union member states go to the polls later this week, with big gains expected for parties calling for stricter immigration controls and a kickback on net zero policies. Could there be another Brexit in the air? That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Delighted to have your company. Well, the dust has just about settled on yesterday's sensational announcement from Nigel Farage, the leader of the Reform Party. And today we bring you a fresh, exclusive. Chris Hope, our political editor, will join us shortly with a sensational revelation. Up to 6 Conservative candidates are thinking of filing for the Reform Party, crossing over promises to be a nightmare on Downing Street for Rishi Sunak ahead of Crunch TV debate, leaders debate tonight with Sir Keir Starmer. This is the last thing he needs going into what he expects to be a good day for him. Get in touch all the usual ways, gbnews.com/your save. Let's kick off now with your headlines, and it's Aaron Armstrong.
Good afternoon to you. It's 3:01. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The Home Secretary has refused to clarify exactly how many migrant visas will be allowed each year after vowing to introduce an annual cap. The Conservatives are pledging to limit entry for those coming to the UK to work or join family. Net migration levels, the difference between people leaving and arriving in the UK, are now 3 times higher than they were in 2019. Well, Sir Keir Starmer says the Tories are responsible for the rise, but James Cleverly says their plan will strike a balance between the benefits and the costs of migration.
If we are returned to government, we have committed to a scheme to cap the level of work-related visas. The Migration Advisory Committee will crunch the numbers to balance the economic needs of the country against the pressure on public services and suggest to the government a level.
Meanwhile, Labour Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves and the Scottish Labour leader are on the campaign trail in Scotland. Anna Sarwar says people across the country are turning their backs on the Conservatives and the SNP.
Not a single vote's been cast in this general election campaign. Our feet are firmly on the ground. With hard work, humility and energy, we will still seek to earn people's trust, earn their support, so we make sure we can get rid of this Tory government and start the process of change for Scotland.
Staying with Labour, a candidate who was dropped last week after liking posts on social media criticising Israel and its actions in Gaza has now quit the party. Faiza Shaheen, an economist, was set to contest the Chingford and Woodford Green seat held by former Tory leader Sir Ian Duncan-Smith. She's accused Labour of subjecting her to a systematic campaign of racism, Islamophobia and bullying. Ms Shaheen may still stand as an independent. She's to make an announcement tomorrow. Sir Ed Davey says his plan to invest in personal care will help to rescue the NHS, which is on its knees. The Lib Dems say they would introduce free day-to-day care in England for adults in need, including the elderly and disabled, and they've pledged to increase carers' wages. The Lib Dems say the £3.7 billion cost of their plan will be paid for by reversing tax cuts to big banks. Sir Ed, who cares for his disabled son, says the investment will ultimately ease pressure on the NHS.
We need more people to be supported in care, to look after loved ones who are either waiting to be discharged from hospital or so they don't have to go into hospital. If we do that, we rescue our NHS. Our NHS is on its knees, and one of the main reasons it's on its knees is people haven't invested in social care and they haven't looked after family carers, and our package today does just that.
Reform Party leader Nigel Farage has had milkshake thrown over him whilst campaigning in Essex. The Reform UK leader had been speaking to reporters in the pub after the event. Well, following the incident, Mr Farage was photographed with the drink splattered over his suit as he boarded his campaign bus. British D-Day veterans have arrived in France to take part in commemorations marking the 80th anniversary of the Normandy landings. Live pictures now coming to us from the French coast, where around 24 former service personnel, all of whom are in their 90s or older, are gathering to remember those who lost their lives. They're carrying with them a commemorative torch from the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, which will form the centrepiece of the vigil at the Bayeux War Cemetery tomorrow.
I was 19 at the time. These kids were younger than me, I know they were. Every time I talk to somebody about D-Day, I'm there.
Medical procedures have been cancelled or redirected to other NHS providers following a cyber attack on major hospitals in London. Staff at King's College Hospital, Guy's and St Thomas's and other primary care services in the capital have been told their sites have been hit by a major IT incident. Health trusts are reporting it's had a big impact on the delivery of services, with blood transfusions particularly affected. DNA tests have revealed 3 babies have been abandoned by the same parents over the past 7 years. One of the children was about an hour old when she was found abandoned in a shopping bag in a park in East London earlier this year amid sub-zero conditions. Her 2 siblings, both boys, were discovered in similar circumstances in 2017 and 2019. The details have emerged after reporting restrictions were lifted. A police investigation into the parent's identity is ongoing. More on all of our stories available. The GB News alerts you can get by scanning the QR code on your screen or going to our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Martin.
Thank you, Aaron. Now, welcome to the programme. And we start with what could be a general election bombshell for Rishi Sunak, because GB News can exclusively reveal that as many as 6 Tory candidates, including one who was an MP in the last Parliament, are on the verge of defecting to Reform UK. And it follows Nigel Farage's announcement yesterday that he would, after all, stand for Parliament as well as leading the Reform Party. And let's get straight into this story now with GB News' political editor, Christopher Hope. Chris, this is another sensational exclusive from you. The last thing Rishi Sunak wants to hear ahead of tonight's live TV debate. Tell us more.
Yes, it's further a recognition of what happened yesterday, Martin, and good afternoon here from Salford in Manchester, where we're getting ready for this head-to-head debate between Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak. Now, yesterday, Nigel Farage declared himself as leader of Reform UK, replacing Richard Tice, and a candidate at the Clacton seat in July the 4th's general election. That's what's happened, and the reaction from some Tories has been one of alarm. I know of at least one former MP who's looking to maybe jump across to Reform UK in the next few days, and maybe 5 more candidates, Tory candidates, who may go for Reform. They're worried that this party is being reshaped in more moderate lines. They're seeing lots of what they would describe as moderate spads being dropped into safe seats, special advisors, right-wingers being pushed out. They wonder what's going to happen next, if this will be a realignment of right-wing politics, if there is this big landslide for the Labour Party, as the polls suggest. So the deadline is 4 p.m. on Friday. That's the deadline for all nominations to be submitted everywhere across the country. So the next 72 hours will be crucial for some Tory candidates. Do they want to jump across to Reform UK and join Nigel Farage's attempt to reshape the right of politics, or stick with Rishi Sunak, despite the fact he's falling so far behind in the polls. And that takes me on to tonight's debates. It really is important for both candidates, for Rishi Sunak to try and impress on people he is presidential, he's not the schoolboy, he's the headmaster, he's got authority, he can keep this country safe, he can guide this country through a very difficult back end of this decade. And Sir Keir Starmer, of course, the Labour leader, he needs to impress on people that rather than always picking holes in the Prime Minister's performance at Prime Minister's Questions on PMQs Live on GB News each week, he's got to show why he's got the answer to the problems facing this country. So both candidates face big issues, but on Rishi Sunak, the people I'm speaking to are saying he's got to do a good job tonight to try and ensure that his candidate slate is not whittled down by Friday.
And Chris, of course, you cannot reveal your sources. We can't mention any names, but in broad terms, these 6 candidates here, are there recognisable names in there, household names, sitting current Conservatives that we would know?
Yeah, at least one of them is, Martin. One of them said to me they feel very disillusioned with everything at the moment. They don't understand that's the centre, don't understand the impact that the return of Farage is going to have. I think what that means is we're looking probably at some difficult polling at this weekend. If as I suspect, the reform numbers could go up because people will be drawn towards Farage and his magnetism. Personally, I think they see him as a solution to all of the politicians being a problem for a lot of voters at the moment. He's almost none of the above candidate, a free hit on the body politic. The problem that the main parties have is what will the impact be on actual MPs? No one expects reform to get any more than maybe, 0 MPs is what the polling forecast, but maybe 1 in Clacton if Farage can defy the polls and win there. But what does it mean to the other parties? Now, Farage thinks he can take some support from Labour, but really it's a Tory problem because the party has got this battle with itself and the right going back to the Brexit days. It's yet to resolve.
And Chris, a fascinating line in your exclusive story for GB News is some dissatisfaction being talked about around some of the Tory wets, as they would be called, getting safe seats at a meeting yesterday. So a lot of Red Wall MPs, Red Wall candidates feeling that they're going to lose their seats having done nothing wrong, and seeing people who remain as a rump of a more liberal end of the Conservative Party being gifted safe seats. There's division within the Conservative ranks on that particular point, Chris.
Yeah, I don't want to be too... It's quite detailed, this for viewers, but basically when you call the general election and there are empty seats and sitting MPs retire suddenly, as we've seen in recent weeks as MPs, that gives the power to the centre to impose a shortlist of 3, and some local candidates can put their names forward too, but it does give the centre of the party the chance to drop in favoured special advisors, favoured aides into safe seats, and that's what's really getting the goat of a lot of Red Wall Tory MPs. They see people, advisors to Rishi Sunak and other senior ministers getting key seats in the south of England, and they worry about the future of the party. If it's going to be this kind of moderate Tory future, then the right is being pushed out even further. It's more grist to the mill of Nigel Farage. Paul Goodman, who is a Tory peer, he estimates that 10 of the 46 candidates selected recently by Central Office Number 10 are special advisors. So there's a feeling that lots of professional people involved in politics are getting safe seats in the next Parliament. And what does that mean going forward for the rump of the Tory party if these difficult polls come to pass on July the 4th?
Starmer has been accused of a similar thing, giving safe seats to his advisors, Rachel Reeves' advisors, and decommissioning, as it were, the Labour left. So it's not unique to the Conservative Party. Chris Hope,
both
excellent.
Sides, Martin.
Yeah, Chris Hope, excellent exclusive, and we'll join you throughout the rest of the show as we build up towards tonight's leaders' debate. Thank you very much, Chris Hope. And let's speak now with the political commentator, Emma Webb. Emma, welcome to the show. You may have overheard there the news of potentially 6 Conservatives, including 1 household name, defecting to the Reform Party in the wake of what happened yesterday. Spells yet more bad news for Rishi Sunak, if true.
It certainly does. I think simply the news of Farage choosing to run, doing that U-turn there, and I think it's a a very good thing that he did, but it is going to result in a bloodbath for the Conservatives. And all of the polls consistently showing not only that Labour are ahead, but that the Conservative Party are doing very, very badly indeed. So I think that they've made an absolutely huge mistake, going back to Chris Hope's exclusive just there, in parachuting these, as you put it, Tory wets into safe seats. Will Tanner, someone who's been a special advisor to Rishi Sunak, has been given a safe seat. That's something that has just come out in the press within the last couple of hours. So this is really, really bad news for Rishi Sunak. And time again, it's no surprise that Tory donors are considering pulling or have decided to pull their money out of the Conservative Party's election campaign, when Rishi Sunak is consistently making what I think are the complete opposite to the decisions that would play well with the electorate. And I think those scenes of Nigel Farage in Clacton, and I don't mean him having the milkshake thrown over him, but those scenes of extraordinarily large crowds coming to hear him speak at 24 hours notice. I mean, I think that is probably unprecedented. So there is really something bubbling away within the electorate at the moment. People are feeling really disenfranchised with the Conservative Party, and whether they agree with reforms policies or not, I think that Farage is giving people something positive to vote for as an alternative to the Conservative Party, and that should really worry them.
Can I ask you, Emma, about this notion of milkshake? And I think we can show some pictures of Nigel with that milkshake on him earlier. Of course, this happened in 2019 on the European Union, 5 years ago, actually, this week, 5 years to the week, when the final week of that European Union campaign was in full flow. Nigel was milkshake then. And I remember well, Emma, it actually did him a favour. People look at this kind of thing, don't they? And they think we hate people who are bullies, and the Liberal left always call out political bullying unless it's against people they disagree with.
Of course, Clacton is my neck of the woods, and I can say anecdotally that I think that Nigel Farage stands a very good chance of winning Clacton. So that person throwing the milkshake over him there, I imagine, probably would have not gone down very well with the crowds that had come to see him speak, and is probably not representative of Clacton's view of Farage as a whole. It was all part and parcel of this trend of, I think you could call it luxury protesting. It's people who want to make a protest without going to very much effort. And actually, frankly, as many other people have been saying today, I think that is assault, and that young woman should have been arrested for doing that, particularly when we see so many threats against the safety of MPs, the potential of things like acid attacks. You need to see the law stepping in and dealing with things like that, because it is juvenile, but it's also completely unacceptable in a democratic society where you should have discussion and hear your opponents out rather than attacking them physically, even if it is just with a milkshake.
Totally agree. Emma Webb, thank you for your insights. As ever, thanks for joining us on the show. Always an absolute delight. Now, just to remind you of those who have declared their candidacy in the constituency of Clacton so far. We have Jovan Uwasu Nepal, Labour Party, Giles Watling, Conservative Party, Matthew Bensalem, Liberal Democrats, Nigel Farage, Reform UK, and Natasha Osborne of the Green Party. And that list of candidates isn't yet finalised, as the deadline isn't until later this week, 5 o'clock Friday, in fact. It will be published on the GBNews website once that list is fully finalised. And GBNews has an extended invitation to all of the candidates. We've invited all those candidates on the show. Please come on if you'd like to talk to us. Now, immigration has been back on the general election campaign agenda today as the Conservatives announced plans for a new annual migration cap if they win the next general election. And here is Home Secretary James Cleverly speaking about this earlier today.
If we are returned to government, we have committed to a scheme to cap the level of work-related visas. The Migration Advisory Committee will crunch the numbers to balance the economic needs of the country against the pressure on public services and suggest to the government a level. The government will then decide what that overall cap is, and that will be validated by a vote in Parliament. Immigration levels have been too high. We have taken action to bring them down, and we are committed to continue doing so. In stark contrast with the Labour Party, Keir Starmer has said all immigration legislation is racist. That is ridiculous. We need to get a grip of it. We need to bring it down, and we'll do so professionally and properly.
However, speaking to reporters earlier, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer attacked the Conservatives' record on immigration, saying they had let it get out of control.
Well, the Conservatives have let immigration get out of control. We've got record numbers of people coming to this country, and they've now said they're going to have a visa cap. They've not said what the number is. They've got a visa cap without a cap. We did have a visa cap before. Rishi Sunak argued to get rid of it, which they did in 2020, and now they're going back to it, but without a number. It is utter chaos. They've lost control, and that's why this election can't come soon enough, because I think the country is crying out to say, just end the chaos, let's insert some control, turn a page, and start to rebuild the country with Labour. And on immigration, we have to tackle the central issue, which is that we need a skills strategy in this country, so we don't have to have so many people arriving on work visas, and we have to hammer down on bad bosses who aren't complying with Labour standards, and we would ban them from recruiting people from abroad. If you don't comply with our Labour standards, you shouldn't be allowed to recruit from abroad.
Meanwhile, as for the Liberal Democrats, well, their leader Sir Ed Davey has been out campaigning in Cheadle today, and his party has today pledged to provide free personal care to elderly and disabled patients in their own home if they are part of the next government.
Yes, very close to my heart. I've been a carer most of my life, carer for my mum when she was terminally ill then. My gran looked after me, and I looked after my nana when she was frail, and now I look after my disabled son with my wife. And so I sort of understand about how family carers are under pressure, because there are millions of families who are looking after their loved ones and they need more support. We also need to invest in social care. These are the care workers who are paid. We need to make sure they get a decent minimum wage, and we're saying £2 an hour above the national minimum wage at least, because we need more people to be supported in care, to look after loved ones who are either waiting to be discharged from hospital or so they don't have to go into hospital. If we do that, we rescue our NHS. Our NHS is on its knees, and one of the main reasons it's on its knees is people haven't invested in social care and they haven't looked after family carers, and our package today does just that.
Of course, it's an interesting plan, but how much is it going to cost? How could it be funded?
Yeah, well, the personal care costs $2.7 billion a year, and the extra money for care workers would cost about $1 billion, so $3.7 billion. We're saying that the tax cuts to the big banks, which the Conservatives have given, should be reversed. That would raise £4.3 billion more than our policy. There are other aspects of it, and we think this is just an essential investment to save our NHS and to provide the care that people need.
Sir Ed Davey out and about in Cheadle today. And coming up, a cyber attack has affected some major hospitals in London. We'll have all the details on this in just a moment. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
The Princess of Wales has said she's excited by a new report on prioritising early childhood, a cause, as we know, that she's closely associated with.
Yes, the task force findings claim that the UK could reap £45.5 billion in economic benefits if firms prioritise early childhood.
Well, let's talk about this now with our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. Good morning, Cameron.
Good morning.
I suppose it's characteristically Catherine, isn't it, to say she doesn't want to distract from this report by sort of people talking about her health. But we should start probably by saying she said she's not feeling well enough to come and talk about this in public, but sort of saying she's watching it, keeping a close eye from behind closed doors.
Yeah, absolutely. This should not be seen as a return to work by the Princess of Wales, but I have been told she's A, read the report and B, been briefed on it. But this all stems really from her work when she started being a working member of the royal family, where she was working closely with people suffering from addiction, mental health problems. And what she found is all of these issues tend to stem from a poor start in life, so the first 5 years of a child's life. So in January 2023, she set up Shaping Us, this awareness campaign for the early years. 2 months later, she convened the Business Task Force, so 8 members of big businesses across the UK, and over a generation, that could add, as they claim, more than £40 billion to the UK economy each year. We spoke to Peter Grigg yesterday. He's the chair of Home Starts UK, a charity which supports young families. Let's hear what he said about the Princess's role in this.
She's been a real driving force behind the report and everything it's done. And when we've spent time with the Royal Foundation, what it does, it reminds everyone that this is really important work and early childhood matters, that more businesses should get involved, that more charities are out there for people who want to do more to support families and children. So it's been a wonderful experience.
The People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 3:25. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, major hospitals in London have declared a critical incident after a cyber attack hit some services, with some operations and blood transfusions having to be cancelled. Well, reporter Charlie Peters joins us now to tell us more. Charlie, welcome to the show. An incredibly concerning story, this. Tell us more.
Hi, Martin. Well, as we understand it, several major London hospitals have reduced their procedures and operations today, with some total cancellations, including Guy's and St Thomas's in Lambeth, the Royal Brompton in Chelsea, the Harefield Hospital in Hillingdon, and also King's College London Hospital in Denmark Hill, Camberwell, South London. And it all revolves around a ransomware cyber attack on an NHS partner called Synovis, which involves itself in pathology. It assesses blood that's ready for transfusions and also for blood tests. Now, as we understand it, this company, Synovis, was under this ransomware attack yesterday afternoon, and that's when operations and procedures were first cancelled. But that crisis has continued into today, with many people arriving at the hospitals this morning and finding out, while they're being prepped for theatre, that their operation won't go ahead. One medic at the KCL hospital in Denmark Hill told me this morning that it was an awful situation. Lots of procedures had been cancelled. They had no indication of when they might return. And for any viewers and listeners not sure what a ransomware attack is, it's when a cyber attacker, a hostile actor, is able to encrypt files or information on a device, and they only give you back the encryption tool or the password once you pay, as you might expect, a ransom. We don't have any further information at this time as to who is behind this particular cyber attack, but it is a severe situation. A critical incident has been declared in at least 2 of those hospitals, with one source telling the Health Service Journal that it could take several weeks, not just days, to get this system back running again.
And Charlie, people will be familiar with cyber attacks, for example, on the MOD or on the government. You can see a clear benefit to that, to get national security information. But this is people about to have heart surgery. This is people having life-saving blood transfusions. On what planet is this anything approaching remotely reasonable?
Well, the power of a ransomware attack is that they will want to target the most critical infrastructure and the most sensitive cyber operations, those that people who have access and need those units to survive are most desperate to get them back up and running. That's the real power of such an attack, and it's possibly why these locations and that part of the NHS service has been targeted. And of course, with any ransomware, there will be potential discussions going on as to how to get that encryption immigration back up and running. So far, very limited information coming from the NHS and these various trusts that have been facing this cyber attack. But as we understand it, several procedures cancelled today. They first were cancelled yesterday, and only the most urgent blood tests and transfusion are taking place. It appears, according to reporting in the last hour, that Synovis is now withdrawing its services just to paper service, so no tech pushback from Synovis to the NHS trusts, no link up with the hospitals. This, of course, is generating a significant bottleneck and creating what has been described by one doctor as an awful situation in South London today.
Well, an astonishing story. Thank you very much, Charlie Peters, for bringing us fully up to speed. Now, a change of gear now, because it's officially summertime and we've got a brand new summer giveaway. And that's £15,000 in cash, tax-free, to make summer spectacular. A brand new iPhone, AirPods and 500 quid to spend at the UK attraction of your choice. If you like theme parks, visiting stately homes, or even fancy a spa day out, well, it could be on us here at GB News. And here's all the details that you need to enter.
It's the Great British Summer Giveaway, and have we got a prize for you? There's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, there's loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including all 27 EU member states go to the polls later this week, from Thursday, in fact, with big gains expected for parties calling for stricter immigration controls and net zero policies. Could there be another Brexit in the air? And we'll also be crossing to our reporter in Normandy, where events are commemorating. But first, your latest news headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Hi there, it's 3:31. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Rishi Sunak's facing another blow in his general election campaign, as GB News can reveal up to 6 Conservative candidates could switch to Reform UK. It follows Nigel Farage's decision to stand as a candidate himself and lead the party. The candidates, including at least one former MP in the last Parliament, are in a race against time to decide before the nomination deadline on Friday. One is weighing up whether to jump to Reform UK. He's told us their mind could be made up by Rishi Sunak's performance in tonight's leaders' debate with Sir Keir Starmer. Home Secretary James Cleverly's refused to clarify exactly how many migrant visas will be allowed each year, after vowing to introduce an annual cap. The Conservatives have pledged to limit entry for those coming to the UK to work or join family in an effort to reduce immigration. MPs would vote on a number recommended by the Migration Advisory Committee. Home Secretary says their plan will strike a balance between the benefit and the cost of migration.
If we are returned to government, we have committed to a scheme to cap the level of work-related visas. The Migration Advisory Committee will crunch the numbers to balance the economic needs of the country against the pressure on public services and suggest to the government a level.
Meanwhile, net migration levels are now 3 times higher than they were in 2019, and the Labour leader says the government is responsible after it removed the cap 4 years ago with the introduction of a post-Brexit skilled workers visa.
The Conservatives have let immigration get out of control. We've got record numbers of people coming to this country, and they've now said they're going to have a visa cap. They've not said what the number is. They've got a visa cap without a cap. We did have a visa cap before. Rishi Sunak argued to get rid of it, which they did in 2020, and now they're going back to it but without a number. It is utter chaos.
The Liberal Democrats say the cost of their social care plan will be funded by reversing tax cuts offered to big banks. Sir Ed Davies promised to pay carers more and has offered free care to adults in need in England, including the elderly and disabled, matching the system in Scotland. He says the £3.7 billion investment will help relieve pressure on the NHS. Finally, major hospitals in London have declared a critical incident after a cyber attack led to the cancellation of operations and the loss of blood transfusions. Staff at King's College Hospital, Guy's and St Thomas's and several primary care services in the capital have been told their sites have been hit by a major IT incident. Health trusts are reporting the incident has had a major impact on the delivery of services, with transfusions particularly affected. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. The QR code's on your screen. Details also on gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, a quick look at the markets. The pound buys you $1.2774 and €1.1743. Gold will cost £1,816.73 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 82.44 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Aaron. Now we've got loads more still to come, but first there's a brand new way to get in touch with us here at GB News, and here's Bev Turner with all of the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello again. I'm Jules Buckley. Still seeing major queues for the M62 this afternoon, now between junctions 23 and 22. That's Huddersfield and Rushworth Moor. There's a lane shut both ways. It's for ongoing emergency barrier repairs. Congestion westbound to just before Brickhouse 25 and back towards junction 22 eastbound. Northbound M6 still struggling. A lane shut for an earlier bump. That's between Spaghetti Junction at 6 up towards Great Barr at 7. The queues back to Castle Bromwich at 5. Also slow on the southbound side. Northbound M1, a lorry's having a tyre change around Luton 10 up to 11. There's a lane shut, and the northbound M11 queuing for an earlier bump just around Bishop Stortford at junction 8. That's been shifted to the hard shoulder, so all the live lanes are open, but we're still seeing some queues, and that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is about the Biden administration kind of resisting calls from Harry's lawyers whether or not this ongoing thing about releasing his visa records over the alleged, in Spare, he admitted to taking, remember his memoir Spare? He admitted to taking cocaine, marijuana and magic mushrooms. And a lot of people are saying, was he honest and truthful in his application, in his visa application? You have to say, have you taken drugs? He said no, and then in Spare he said yes. So I think this is absolutely fascinating. They're saying they can't release these records because there is a stigma attached to law enforcement records. Yes, there's a stigma attached to that, but then don't say... everybody else, if you write yes on a visa application, you will be chucked out of the United States. You will be denied entry. So I think this is fascinating that on this issue of whether there is a stigma for Harry or not, he can have his law enforcement records not released into the public domain.
The bottom line is, do we want him back?
So what's interesting is it seems to be becoming a political dividing line in the States because Biden is the administration trying to do Harry a favour by keeping them under wraps, but Trump has promised that he will, the file will be made public if he wins again.
Trump's been very strong on this. He said, if Harry lied, then he's out.
The one thing about America is their politicians make ours look sane. Which is saying something.
I'm slightly confused about this whole story because, OK, sure, Prince Harry has said this. How many pop stars, rock stars, movie stars, like every
the difference is, well, I don't think it's just a British. I think millions of Brits, to be fair to them, lie on the form every year. Millions of people from around the world lie on the form every year. Not, of course.
I'm not going to name any pop star specifically, but I would be mightily surprised if any hadn't indulged in what.
Yes, but of course they haven't given written evidence in their biography that they have, and that's the difference.
Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Time is 3:39. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, veterans have been travelling to France ahead of the 80th anniversary of D-Day this Thursday. D-Day, of course, remains the largest amphibious landing in military history. We saw more than 150,000 Allied troops risking their lives by storming Nazi-occupied beaches in Normandy, and that was a huge turning point in the war. Well, veterans will be taking part in commemorative events across the UK and France as part of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission's Lighting Their Legacy campaign. I'm delighted to say we can now cross to join GB News presenter Ellie Costello, who is in Normandy for their arrival with that torch of commemoration. Ellie, I'm so envious. What a magnificent moment. You're there to witness it. Tell us more.
Well, I know how passionate you feel about this, Martin, and just how important it is that this torch of legacy is carried on to the next generation from this great generation. We've just seen about 20 British veterans who served here on D-Day 80 years ago get off that ferry. They came from Portsmouth this morning. They have now passed through the port here, and we can see all of these military vehicles lined up here. Now, they are going to, well, really be in convoy for the commemorative torch that is coming through here shortly. It's a very busy time here at this port, Martin. Let me just show you at the moment, you might be able to catch in the distance there, a Spitfire, which has been dismantled, of course, but that was, of course, operationally used by the British on D-Day. And this here is the commemoration torch that is just coming past us in the port now. We can see it says D-Day 80 on it. It's being carried by a young French person and a young British person. That is to symbolise the torch, the legacy being passed on to the next generation, and how important it is that these young people know what happened here 80 years ago. We can now see the military convoy starting to take off. Let me just have a quick word with Matthew and Andy here, who are from Britain, who have come to be part of this convoy. What does this mean to you, Matthew?
We come over every year because it's important. We just enjoy the celebration and the remembrance, so it's like a twofold thing.
Andy, does it concern you that the younger generation are perhaps forgetting what happened here?
Yeah, it's not done enough in school. There's more that should actually be looked at in terms of the history. Yeah, really important part of British history and indeed European history.
And ladies, let me come back to you, Victoria and Yolanda. And Victoria, you're going to be part of this convoy now and this peace torch that's being brought to light the war graves. How important is that, do you think?
Very important. Well, it is. We enjoy coming here. We support the veterans, and it's just something that is close to our hearts.
And we've just seen the veterans drive past, haven't we, Yolanda? These are men now in their 90s into their hundreds. They are old men, and it is so moving to see them. It's possibly the last of that generation, that great generation.
It's extremely humbling, and it's really important for us to be here to give our thanks, really. And
it is so important, yeah. And you come here every year, don't you? This is something that you feel really passionate about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So we'll just let you move on, because I know you need to be a part of this convoy. As you can see, Martin, this convoy is starting to move off. We are in the way, which is something that we tend to do quite often. But it is the most moving sight, as you can see, the 1942 Jeep there that we're just speaking to our guests on. That is part of that military convoy that is taking that torch of commemoration to the war graves. And Martin, over the next 24 hours, the plan is that the 25,000 war graves here in Normandy will be lit up with that torch of commemoration, so that by D-Day, on Thursday, the 6th of June, all 25,000 graves will be illuminated. It will be such a moving and emotional sight, I'm sure. And you can see the Spitfire here as well, Martin, just a reminder of what was flying in the skies above our heads 80 years ago.
Ellie, I think we really have to stay on these pictures. They are so fantastic. What a great report. You were there for the moment when that torch came ashore. It's an area of France I know very well. I've visited there since I was a boy, and the war memorials, the graves there, they just go on and on and on. When you drive through them, Eddie, the sheer magnitude of the loss and the sacrifice of what the Allies gave to liberate mainland Europe from the Nazis, hugely, hugely important. We never, ever forget this, Ellie Costello.
We just can't forget this, Martin. I mean, watching those veterans there on the port side, 3 of them were fit enough to come out onto the port side and to hold that torch and to pass it on to those 2 young people that you saw in the back of that military vehicle there. And you can only imagine the emotion that those men are feeling. 80 years ago, they stormed these very beaches to free Europe from Nazi rule, and they were probably 18, 19-year-old boys at the time, now men in their 90s, some into their hundreds, and they're here seeing those shores again, potentially for the last time. And I think there is that sense, Martin, that this is the last major anniversary, the last major event where there will be a great number of veterans, 20 or so, that were on a ferry. But Martin, the very same journey was made by veterans in 2019. There were 255 of them on board at that time. Today, just 20 fit enough to make that journey from Portsmouth. You can imagine that it was a journey of mixed emotions. I was hearing this afternoon that they laid a wreath on board that ferry to commemorate those who never made it on shore during D-Day. You can see a helicopter now joining this military convoy, and you might be able to make out, Martin, the number of people that have actually gathered on the streets to wave to those veterans, to see that torch of commemoration, and that helicopter now coming down just here in Normandy. And Martin, what an incredible way to honour, as you say, this great generation and for those who made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom.
You know, Ali, can we just keep the cameras on the crowds and pan around and just show us? I just really don't want to get off these pictures. You know me, Ali, I get very, very emotional about this kind of stuff unless that fella's moving us on, spoiling the romantic moment. What amazing sights, especially recently, of course, we saw that tragedy of a Spitfire that crashed, and we heard a lot of rumours that those talismanic, historic aircraft were going to be grounded due to safety concerns. How marvellous to see those Spitfires rolling ashore. No doubt they will be assembled in France and they will fly again. And that's a moment that will signify the true importance. We're back after the break. Fantastic scenes, Ellie Costello, from Bayeux in Normandy to mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day this week.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It will turn brighter from the north into this afternoon, but it is going to turn considerably colder. And that's because we have got colder air from the north diving south and eastwards through this evening. So that will bring the brighter conditions to the north. But denoting the difference between that air is a cold front, and that will be bringing some cloud and rain to many southern and central areas of England and Wales through this evening. That will clear to the southeast overnight, and behind it, it will turn much brighter or clearer and drier for much of the UK. However, frequent showers will start to move in across northwestern areas, and it is going to be quite a chilly start to the day on Wednesday. We could see locally a grass frost, but I think most of us just down into the low single figures rurally. And that could mean it's cold enough for some snow showers to fall over the high ground of Scotland, above around 600 metres, and plenty of showers across much of Scotland as well, particularly across northwestern areas. Across eastern Scotland, it should be that much much drier. And across Northern Ireland as well, still some brightness, and eastern parts of Northern England should see a fairly bright start to the day. But the best of the sunshine tomorrow morning will be across parts of southern England and the southeast as well, where it should stay fairly dry and bright through much of the day. However, it is going to be a bit of a fresher day. Some cloud will bubble up across southern and central areas into the afternoon. There is a risk of showers across parts of Wales and into the Midlands, but I think the greatest risk is definitely across parts of northwest Scotland, where there'll be quite frequent heavy as well, and there's a risk of thunderstorms. Temperatures only reaching 11 or 12 degrees in the north and a little bit cooler as well in the south, only highs of around 16 or 17 degrees, which is a few degrees cooler than today. So definitely a fresher day to come tomorrow, and potentially quite an unsettled one across northern areas. It'll stay unsettled into the evening across the parts of the northwest. The theme continues into Wednesday, into Thursday and Friday, but it does look a little bit drier and warmer into the weekend.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's election channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 4. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, voters in all 27 countries in the European Union will go to the polls later this week, starting Thursday, in fact. And populist parties are expected to do well as the more established parties grapple with a number of major issues, including, of course, immigration and national identity. Well, to discuss the prospects of those elections, I'm now joined by the head of policy at MCC Brussels, Jacob Reynolds. Jacob, welcome to the show. So we have election fever on this side of the channel. Of course, in the European Union, 27 states go to the polls starting on Thursday, Friday, and we can expect results on Monday. Tell me, can we expect to see a rise of populist parties, of those who support the nation state, and perhaps a backlash, a bit like Brexit, against the European Union?
Well, I mean, but before maybe we get into some of that, you said election fever in the UK, and the mood in Brussels and in some of the European capitals is kind of slightly different, because the Brussels elite here are very much billing this as the election that is the last chance to save democracy. They say that they're terrified of the kind of right-wing parties doing well, and they're saying that this is one last chance to kind of save democracy and save the European Union. But curiously, if you speak to a lot of people across the continent, there's kind of little appetite for this election. And I think that one of the reasons underlying that is that the kind of Brussels elite are very much distant and afar from the concerns of ordinary voters. They like to talk a lot about their pet issues around the Green Deal and things like that. But the issues, as you kind of identified, that ordinary people across Europe really care about are much closer to home. They're to do with Europe's kind of very sluggish economy, the terrible energy crisis that still affects the economy of major European countries, and of course, as you said, immigration. So the elections are going to be very interesting to see how much there is actually a fight back against kind of the policies of the European Union that are decided here in Brussels that seem very, very remote from ordinary people's lives.
And in terms of the nation states where we might see the greatest upsets, France, of course, is having an uprising. Jordan Bartella, a young member of Le Pen's movement, is catching the eye. In Germany, in Ireland, of course, housing and immigration, and in Netherlands, Geert Wilders' party has appealed to younger voters even by making this about affordable housing and controlling immigration levels. Where do you think we might see some upsets?
Yeah, well, I think you've covered some of the major ones, although you can never rule anything out. But the kind of key thing that that's telling us really is that for a long time, European elites have kind of thought of the kind of rightward shift in European politics as something that happens kind of far away. Maybe it's confined to Poland or to Hungary or places like that. But really, the kind of disastrous results of EU policies over decades are really coming home to roost for those core EU countries. So in France, as you know, it's very possible that the Ralliement National will have a very big success in France. In Germany, things are a little bit more complicated. The AfD probably will do relatively well, but things have been complicated there by recent scandals, and very much kind of leading the charge as they have been for the farmers' protests and now on immigration. The Dutch have kind of formed a government recently, which is promising to be very tough on immigration, and that might have a big effect coming into the European polls. But the overall message is that this widespread anger at the policies of the European Union is very much coming home to roost, and the reaction of European elites.
I'm afraid, Jacob Reynolds, we have to leave it there, but we'll cut back, of course, on all this throughout the rest of the week. Now, on the way, we'll get more reaction to that GB News exclusive that 6 Tory candidates, including at least one former MP, could be about to join Nigel Reform Party. Nigel Farage's Reform Party. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, but now it's your weather with Annie Shuttleworth.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It will turn brighter from the north into this afternoon, but it is going to turn considerably colder. And that's because we have got colder air from the north diving south and eastwards through this evening. So that will bring the brighter conditions to the north. But denoting the difference between that air is a cold front, and that will be bringing some cloud and rain to many southern and central areas of England and Wales through this evening. That will clear to the southeast overnight, and behind it, it will turn much brighter or clearer and drier for much of the UK. However, frequent showers will start to move in across northwestern areas, and it is going to be quite a chilly start to the day on Wednesday. We could see locally a grass frost, but I think most of us just down into the low single figures rurally. And that could mean it's cold enough for some snow showers to fall over the high ground of Scotland, above around 600 metres, and plenty of showers across much of Scotland as well, particularly across northwestern areas. Across eastern Scotland, it should be that much drier, and across Northern Ireland as well. Still some brightness, and eastern parts of northern England should see a fairly bright start to the day. But the best of the sunshine tomorrow morning will be across parts of southern England and the southeast as well, where it should stay fairly dry and bright through much of the day. However, it is going to be a bit of a fresher day. Some cloud will bubble up across southern and central areas into the afternoon. There is a risk of showers across parts of Wales and into the Midlands, but I think the greatest risk is definitely across parts of northwest Scotland, where there'll be quite frequent heavy as well, and there's a risk of thunderstorms. Temperatures only reaching 11 or 12 degrees in the north, and a little bit cooler as well in the south, only highs of around 16 or 17 degrees, which is a few degrees cooler than today. So definitely a fresher day to come tomorrow, and potentially quite an unsettled one across northern areas. It'll stay unsettled into the evening across the parts of the northwest. The theme continues into Wednesday, into Thursday and Friday, but it does look a little bit drier and warmer into the weekend.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News. The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon again. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Long queues on the westbound M62 as barrier repairs have now been completed. Huddersfield to Rushworth Moor Junction 23 to 22. All lanes open, but still a legacy of queues. Now, the northbound M6 Middlewich 18 up to Knutsford 19 takes about an hour and 20 minutes to get through. 3 lanes are still combed off for those emergency repairs. A lorry having a tyre change in the northbound M1 around Luton. Junction 10 to 11 northbound, slow going, but all lanes are back open. There's a broken down car westbound on the M4. It's queuing. A lane shut just from Brentford to 2 to 3 for Hayes and Heston. Queuing back to the Chiswick flyover the A4. And clockwise M25, all lanes open after Enfield 25. It follows an earlier bump there, but we're still seeing congestion. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We've got summer sewn up with an incredible trio of treats, and you could win them. first, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. Fun in the sun could be on us. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Coming up, GB News can exclusively reveal that 6 Tory candidates are on the verge of sensationally defecting to the Reform Party. This spells a huge headache for Rishi Sunak ahead of tonight's first live TV debate. We'll bring you all of the inside information. And this comes as the Tories have today pledged to deliver what David Cameron promised in 2010, to finally cap legal immigration levels. But with migration levels rising, is it too little, too late? Well, I'll speak with the Tory Immigration Minister to ask him if the cap finally fits. And all 27 European Union member states go to the polls later this week, starting on Thursday, with big gains expected for parties calling for stricter immigration controls and a clampdown on net zero policies. Could there be another Brexit in the air? That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a delight to have your company. I want to hear from you, and there's a new way to get in touch with us. Send your views and post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say. And regarding the Nigel Farage milkshake attack that's happened on earlier today, we've got a statement here from Essex Police, and it reads, it was reported a man had a drink thrown over him as he left a premises in the area. A 25-year-old woman from Clacton was arrested at the scene on suspicion of assault. While officers were responding and making this arrest, a second individual, a man, was arrested on suspicion of assaulting an emergency worker. Both individuals remain in custody for questioning. So Nigel Farage, milkshake there. 2 arrests have now occurred. Now it's time for the news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Well, the top story from the GB Newsroom today is that Rishi Sunak's facing another blow in his general election campaign. As you've been hearing, GB News can reveal that up to 6 Conservative candidates could switch to Reform UK. That follows Nigel Farage's decision to stand as a Reform candidate himself and lead the party. The candidates, including at least one former MP from the last Parliament, are in a race against time now to make up their minds before the nomination deadline on Friday. One of the candidates weighing up whether to jump to Reform UK told GB News their mind could be made up by Rishi Sunak's performance in tonight's Leaders' Debate with Sir Keir Starmer. And next to those latest breaking developments from Essex, where Nigel Farage has been campaigning this afternoon. We've heard in the last few minutes that a woman has been arrested on suspicion of assault after the Reform UK leader had a milkshake thrown over him. Following that incident, Mr Farage was photographed with the drink splattered over his suit as he boarded his campaign bus. Officers were responding and arresting the 25-year-old woman when a man was also arrested on suspicion of assaulting an emergency worker. Both individuals, we understand, are now in custody and are being questioned by police. Meanwhile, the Home Secretary James Cleverly has refused to clarify exactly how many migrant visas will be allowed each year after vowing to introduce an annual cap. The Conservatives have pledged to limit entry for those coming into the UK for work or to join family in an effort to reduce immigration. MPs would vote on a number recommended by the Migration Advisory Committee. Net levels, that's the difference between people leaving and arriving the UK each year, has tripled in number since 2019. Well, the Home Secretary James Cleverly says the plan will strike a balance between the benefit and costs of migration.
If we are returned to government, we have committed to a scheme to cap the level of work-related visas. The Migration Advisory Committee will crunch the numbers to balance the economic needs of the country against the pressure on public services and suggest to the government a level.
James Cleverly. Now, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says the Conservatives are responsible for the rising numbers of migrants and, they say, have reversed their decision made 4 years ago when they reformed the immigration system as part of Brexit.
The Conservatives have let immigration get out of control. We've got record numbers of people coming to this country, and they've now said they're going to have a visa cap. They've not said what the number is, so they've got a visa cap without a cap. We did have a visa cap before. Rishi Sunak argued to get rid of it, which they did in 2020, and now they're going back to it but without a number. It is utter chaos.
Well, more than 200 migrants arrived into the UK on small boats this morning. GB News can reveal 4 vessels made the journey from northern France after 63 people managed to cross yesterday. It takes the total number of illegal migrants who've arrived so far this year to more than 10,500, and that represents a 38% increase on the same period last year. Sir Ed Davey says his plan to invest in personal care to help rescue the NHS, which he says is on its knees, is part of his manifesto. The Lib Dems say they'd introduce free day-to-day care in England for adults in need, including the elderly and disabled, and have pledged to increase carers' wages. They say the £3.7 billion cost of their social care plan will be paid for by reversing tax cuts for big banks. So Ed, who cares for his own disabled son, says the investment will ultimately ease pressure on the NHS.
We need more people to be supported in care, to look after loved ones who are either waiting to be discharged from hospital or so they don't have to go into hospital. If we do that, we rescue our NHS. Our NHS is on its knees, and one of the main reasons it's on its knees is people haven't invested in social care and they haven't looked after family carers, and our package today does just that.
Said Davey. Major hospitals in London have today declared a critical incident after a cyber attack led to the cancellation of operations and blood transfusions. Staff at King's College Hospital, Guy's and St Thomas's in London have been told that their sites have been hit by a major IT incident. Health trusts are reporting that the incident has had a major impact on the delivery of their services, with blood transfusions particularly affected. Now, as you've been seeing on GB News throughout today, British D-Day veterans have arrived in France to take part in commemorations marking the 80th anniversary of the Normandy landings. Around 24 former service personnel, all of whom are either in their 90s or older, are gathering to remember those who lost their lives. They're carrying with them a...
I was 19 at the time. These kids were younger than me, I know they were. Every time I talk to somebody about D-Day, I'm there.
Well, that was George Chandler, a D-Day veteran. Sorry to cut that off there, but we'll bring you more, of course, throughout the day right here on GB News. Now back to Martin.
Thank you very much, Polly. Now, let's get back to a GB News exclusive, which said as many as 6 Tory candidates, including one who was an MP in the last Parliament, are on the verge of sensationally defecting to Reform UK. And it follows Nigel Farage's announcement yesterday that he would, after all, stand for Parliament as well as leading the party. Well, let's get straight into this now with GB News' political editor correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, you got a promotion there. Welcome to the studio. The big news tonight is the debates on ITV. Ahead of this is the worst possible news that Rishi Sunak could face. Defection in the ranks, and as many as 6 could jump ship to Reform.
Yes. According to our political editor, Chris Hope, 6 Conservative candidates seriously considering going over to Reform, including one that was a Conservative MP that most of us would know. We'll have to see if it happens. They've got till, I think, Friday, late Friday afternoon. Yep. But this is just more bad news for the Prime Minister. I mean, it feels like it can't get any worse for the Prime Minister. It started off 2 weeks tomorrow since he stood in the rain, made that shock announcement, going against the advice of Isaac Levido, their sort of campaign guru, to call this election. And one of the only benefits was that he appeared to catch Nigel Farage off guard, because the following morning, Farage said, he's wrong-footed me, I don't have time to stand, I was going to, but now I can't. And then, lo and behold, yesterday, this bombshell announcement. And, I mean, look, we've had these polls, different polls over the last few days. Nothing that Rishi Sunak has done in terms of announcements of national service or triple lock plus has shifted the dial. If anything, the polls are going even worse for the Conservatives. And that was before Nigel Farage stepped into the fray. So some projections saying, you know, Labour is going to get potentially a 200 or 300 seat majority, Conservatives down to possibly less than 100 seats. And that was with Richard Tice as leader. And Nigel Farage is so much better known and is so charismatic, and whatever you think of him, has got a way of connecting with ordinary people that people like Boris Johnson have and Donald Trump has. That's very, very rare. I mean, we saw the sort of rock star welcome he was given in Clacton. So this is the worst possible news for Rishi Sunak ahead of a big debate which really couldn't be any more important for him.
And there was a further report this morning of 3 major donors to the Conservative Party. They'd done a piece of analysis, Catherine, they'd done a report, and they basically concluded there was no point spending any more money on the Conservative Party. It was throwing good money after bad. They're putting out. Could we, do you think, see now a collapse in the funding base also?
They were already worried about funding. I remember last weekend talking about this, that basically donors are not putting the money in because they feel that the Conservatives are going to lose, and therefore what is in it for them? So they were already ringing round trying to galvanise, get more donations. And the trouble is, the more the projections are so dire for the Conservative Party, in a way, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that, yes, that's a problem too. And I mean, in terms of, I was talking about social media the other day, looking at sort of things on TikTok, just to give you an example, Labour spent 1.2 million on social media last week. That was 4 times what the Conservatives have spent. Labour have got some very slick adverts going on. Nigel Farage, they came out within moments of him announcing his candidacy with a very short, slick ad, and the Conservatives seem to be lagging behind with those as well.
OK, thank you very much, Catherine Forster. All eyes now on that big debate later on today. And to discuss that further, who else better to turn to than journalist and broadcaster, the absolute legend that is Alistair Stewart. Alistair, always an absolute delight to have you on the show, and this time in particular because, of course, that TV debate, the one that defined modern political debate on television in 2010, you chaired it. Clegmania was born. We're holding you partly responsible, Alistair. Tell us how important these TV debates can be and share your memories of that amazing night.
Well, the real significance of that first one was the word first. And I've got the picture up there. I don't know if you can see it up over my shoulder there. You had Gordon Brown, Dave Cameron, Nick Clegg, who virtually nobody knew about, and by the end of the evening, everybody was agreeing with. And the fact that it went ahead at all was really significant. There were debates also on the BBC, which David Dimbleby did. Sky had one with Adam Bolton. And all of us afterwards said the real thing that was missing from it in all of the debates that we did was the actions of the electorate, the people who were there. They had their question to ask, whether it was on housing, the economy, defence, whatever it might have been. But there wasn't a lot of interplay. What I don't know is whether Julie Etchingham on ITV has got licence to allow a bit more of that. Because I think it would make it a better event, rather like the GB News People's Forums are so much more lively. And I think we might then see these two men really tested. Because in my humble opinion, and I've debated and chaired a debate with the Prime Minister, I think Sunak does fairly good pat answers, but he's really sharp if he's questioned and challenged by ordinary citizens and voters. And if that happens, then I think Sunak will breathe the first sigh of relief that he's been able to breathe for quite some time. I'm not quite sure what Starmer can do, because they're a real test of charisma and character. And although I'm entirely impartial in these matters, I don't think that Sir Keir scores very high on either of those. I'm not quite sure what he can do to make him suddenly seem a lively, deft, fast on his feet man of the people.
Now, Alistair, of course, Clegg mania gripped the nation after that. As you said, everybody agreed with him. Nobody had heard of him before that. For Nick Clegg, it basically became a career-defining moment. Rishi Sunak seems to be pinning an awful lot on these TV debates, so much so, in fact, Alistair, he wanted 6 of the things. It seems that Rishi Sunak really is the one with the most to gain from this, and Sir Keir Starmer, who's riding away in the polls, he has the most to lose.
I think that that's probably true, and I can understand Rishi's problem in that respect. The only thing I'd caution about is those that think they're really good at telly, and in some respects are really good at telly. I'd include Dave Cameron in that. He's a friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. And he was by far and away the most deft television performer historically. But to me, that night, all those years ago, he was a little bit like a bunny in the headlights. It seemed to overwhelm him slightly. And if that's the image that Rishi Sunak leaves people with at home tonight, then he'll have a real problem. I mean, listening to Chris and you chatting about these possibilities of candidates switching to reform after what Nigel did, 2 things struck me. One is whether what's happening to the Conservative Party now is what happened to the Labour Party after Michael Foot, with the creation of the SDP and the defections from the Labour Party to the SDP. I mean, I think that the Reform Party, it's got Farage now, but it needs a few more big guns. Remember, the SDP had Roy Jenkins, Shirley Williams. I mean, these were towering figures of their day. But we don't know who these 6 people are. Chris Hope knows who they are, but he knows the rules of the game better than any of us. So I suspect we might hear 1 or 2 of the names before the day is out. But it could be a turning point for the Conservative Party, and I find that fascinating. And I wrote down, knowing that I was going to be talking to you, the 2 debates I'd really love to witness, and even chair if it was possible, would be Nigel Farage versus Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer versus Diane Abbott. Then we'd really see what the differences were.
A tantalising prospect, both of them. Alistair Stewart, it's just always an absolute delight to speak to you on your finest form as ever. Legend, thanks very much, mate, for joining us on the show this afternoon.
Martin, wonderful. Good to talk to you as always, my friend, and thank you for having me on.
Wonderful, mate. Lovely. Thank you very much. Humbling moment. What an absolute stellar talent. Now, just a reminder of those who have declared their candidacy in the constituency of Clacton thus far. Jovan Osu, Nepal, Labour Party, Giles Watling, Conservative Party, Matthew Bensalem, Liberal Democrats, Nigel Farage, Reform UK, and Natasha Osborne of the Green Party. That list of candidates isn't yet finalised, as the deadline isn't until later this week, about 5 p.m. Friday, in fact. And that list will be published on the GB News website once it is fully finalised. And GB News has extended an interview invitation to all of those candidates. If you're listening, please join us. Let's talk. Now, yesterday, Sir Keir Starmer set out his plans to tackle national security. Today, he switched his attention to energy security, and the Labour leader says the government led by him would close the door on Putin by reducing Britain's reliance on fossil fuels from overseas. But the Confederation of British Industry, representing almost 200,000 businesses, is urging Sir Keir Starmer to reconsider plans to increase the windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas firms. Well, joining us now is our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. OK, Liam isn't quite there. He'll hove into view soon. Now, I know that Liam Halligan... There he is. Liam joins us now, the main man himself. Liam, we've been talking for so long about great British energy. First of all, what is it? I don't know if we're any closer to that. And also, that fascinating intervention there, Liam, from 200,000 business leaders saying, are you sure about trimming back our reliance on gas and oil? Liam, tell us more.
Nice to be with you, Martin. They found me in the end. So, look, energy policy, energy security, it used to be the kind of thing that nerds like me talked about late at night in whispered tones because no one else was interested. But now, of course, post the war in Ukraine, when we saw spiking energy bills, a massive aggravation of the UK's cost of living crisis, enormous energy costs, not just for households, but for firms as well. What we're talking about now, energy policy, is bang smack in the middle of the political mainstream. And let's have a look at what Starmer said with a little GB News graphic. Hopefully we can find this. This is on the money after all. GB Energy, which is Labour's kind of energy idea, this new entity they're going to create, will close the door on Vladimir Putin, says the Labour leader, of course. Until pretty recently, Western Europe relied on the Russians for 40% of the gas that we use. GB Energy is going to be a publicly owned investment vehicle. Labour have now only lately disclosed, not a new utility company, not replacing the private utilities. It's an investment vehicle, though no word on where the money for new investment infrastructure is going to come from. Now, you know, because we've discussed it in the past, Martin, that half of all the active UK oil and gas fields in the North Sea, there are around 300 of them, are due to close by 2030. And the North Sea, far from being irrelevant, it provides 83% of the oil that we use, 54% of the gas that we use. And guess what? Oil and gas, if you include transport, still account for about 3/4 of the energy used in this, the world's 5th biggest economy, every year. So why does that matter? It matters because Labour are saying they're going to put a proper, quotes, proper windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas. The Tories have already put a windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas projects, which means 75% of the profits of those projects, often involving hundreds of millions of pounds of capital, pretty small returns given fluctuations in wholesale oil and gas prices. 75% of that profit is now taken by the Exchequer, which renders a lot of existing and future North Sea oil and gas drilling projects economically unviable, completely commercially redundant. And now Labour are saying that 75% isn't enough because they're going to put a proper windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas. What do I think about this? I think this is very, very difficult to defend if you are genuinely interested in the UK's energy security and actually if you're interested in net zero. Because if we don't pump our own oil and gas, we end up bringing it from elsewhere. Take all the liquefied natural gas that we're now importing from the US. The US has become the world's biggest exporter of liquefied natural gas. That's gas you turn to a liquid, put it in a ship. Since the war in Ukraine, those exports have absolutely exploded from the US. And when we have those imports, they involve 5 times the carbon emissions of drilling our own oil and gas, given that the tankers themselves are powered by diesel. Look, I'm being told to shut up, so I will. What I would say, though, is that this is absolutely front and centre of the concerns of households and firms across the country. We need to get into the detail, but getting into the detail takes time.
Superb. Liam Halligan, always on the money. You've been talking about this with absolute clarity all the way. You predicted this about soaring energy and the reliance on net zero being a huge problem. Liam Halligan, always a delight to have you on the show. And coming up, I'll be speaking with the Shadow Minister about how he expects his leader to fare in tonight's TV debate with the Prime Minister. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Almost half of those seeking to have an affair are happier with their job than with their primary relationship. But what exactly does a cheater do for a living?
Well, medical assistants and nurses, surprisingly, top the lists of professions for female cheaters. And it's jobs in IT or tech for male cheaters, which I think is less of a surprise.
No.
This is all according to a survey by the dating site Ashley Madison.
OK, so why do people cheat? To answer this, we're joined now by broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Good morning, Lucy.
Morning, Lucy.
So, is it OK of me to say naughty nurses in this day and age? Am I going to get cancelled for that?
You're out.
Yeah, I'm out.
Been cancelled.
See ya.
There's the door.
But yes, you're talking about the caring professions, and I think it's very appropriate.
I'm surprised by that.
But women, well, because they're very nurturing, very loving, very giving, whereas the males who are in tech and IT, very strategic.
Is there a link between high-pressure jobs, maybe nurses infamously, you know, they're working long hours, underpaid, stressed out? Is there a link between jobs of that nature and cheating, maybe as a relief?
Absolutely. Is it just about sex, or is it about emotional connection? Is it about emotional validation? And increasingly, people are discovering that their primary relationship is just not a place where they feel safe.
This survey found that personality didn't actually come into it that much. It was about half and half if you're an introvert or an extrovert that you'd be likely to have an affair.
I think that's right. And I think that just speaks to the fact that all people want to have a good emotional connection. So it doesn't matter whether you're really social or whether you're someone who has to recharge your batteries in private time, that actually we only ever want three things in life. We want to feel safe, we want to feel loved, but we also want to feel heard. And in increasingly a number of marriages and long-term relationships, we get into grooves, we get into ruts, and we stop hearing our partner, we stop listening to them, and they stop listening to us.
The People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
And an arrest has been made in connection to an incident in which Reform Party leader Nigel Farage had milkshake thrown over him whilst campaigning earlier in Essex. Police are questioning a 25-year-old woman, which left Mr Farage splattered with the drink as he boarded his campaign bus. Home Secretary James Cleverly responded to the incident on X, saying the assault on Nigel Farage is unacceptable, just as it would be for any candidate. There is no excuse to resort to behaviour like this. We may disagree, but we debate, and then "We vote, that's democracy," whilst Robert Jenrick also posted, "There can be no place for this kind of behaviour towards any candidate from any political party on the campaign trail. This is clearly a criminal offence and the police should take swift action to uphold the law." Well, here is how Mr Farage has responded.
My milkshake brings all the people to the rally.
Well, that was indeed a short response, but just now a reminder of those who have declared their candidacy in the constituency of Clacton so far. We have Joan Owusu-Nepal, Labour Party, Giles Watling of the Conservative Party, Matthew Bensalem, Liberal Democrats, Nigel Farage, Reform UK, and Natasha Osborne from the Green Party. And the list of candidates isn't yet finalised, as the deadline isn't until later this week. And once that's published, it will be on the GB News website once it has been fully finalised. And GB News has extended an interview invitation to all of those candidates. So if you're watching, please join us. Let's talk. Now, as we approach the 80th anniversary of D-Day, the day that changed the course of the Second World War, we pay respect to those who gave their lives in battle. But not many now know about who fought the Axis powers behind the steely gates of Bletchley Park, where hundreds and thousands of women recruited by the government worked day and night tirelessly to decode the secret German messages that led the Allies to success on D-Day. Well, the historian and broadcaster Tessa Dunlop paid a visit to one of those codebreakers.
Operation Overlord, the unprecedented Allied campaign to liberate Western Europe and defeat the Nazis, has long been immortalised in films, books and documentaries. Much less well known is the crucial role hundreds of thousands of women from all walks of life played in D-Day. They occupied numerous vital roles, including at Bletchley Park, where the majority of recruits were female, working around the clock to deliver ultra-intelligence on enemy movements in France for the Allies. Among their number was Ruth Bourne. Nowadays she's 98, but then she was a young wren fighting the same war as the men on the beaches. Ruth operated one of Alan Turing's bomb machines that helped decrypt Enigma-encoded communications.
We were initially told the work we were doing was specialised. It was to be quite hard work.
So you are at the coalface of the decryption with the bomb machine, but once this ultra-rich material is being harvested, you then have to translate it differently from the original German.
You have to rewrite it.
Yeah, so the Germans don't know that you've been reading their hand.
Yeah, like the good old-fashioned précis that we used to do at school.
Could you explain what it was like to first meet a bomb and what those bombs did?
Well, we met the bomb. It was a little bit surprising. It was very tall. I think it was 7 feet high, 6 foot wide, about 2 foot deep. And it made a chugging noise as the wheels, all these wheels were going round and round.
Do you have any idea of the bigger picture of what you're doing?
Absolutely not. It was another job where women went and operated the machinery while the men went to war.
For many, many years, you weren't aware of the impact of what you were doing, and I find that really interesting.
It was only after 30 years when the security blanket was lifted and the first book came out. I read the importance of the Enigma secret.
It takes a long time, not just for women's war effort to be recognised, but more specifically, the secret work that women did. Ruth didn't get a Bletchley Park medal until the late 1990s, and then the pièce de résistance, her Légion d'honneur, in 2019, aged 94.
Now I know how important the work was. My life would have been completely different if it hadn't been for not just doing something in the war, didn't make my life different, but when it all came out, the importance of what we'd done, I was very privileged to have been chosen. I know, I'm very privileged.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you for sharing.
What a wonderful report. Now, there's loads more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, and I'll be speaking with an immigration minister about his party's new immigration cap plan and how he thinks his boss will perform tonight against Sir Keir Starmer. But first, it's your headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
The headlines this hour: Rishi Sunak's facing another blow in his general election campaign as GB News can reveal that up to 6 Conservative candidates could switch to Reform UK. It follows Nigel Farage's decision to stand as a Reform Party candidate himself and lead the party. The candidates, including at least one former MP in the last Parliament, are in a race against time now to make up their minds before the nomination deadline on Friday. One of those is weighing up whether or not to jump ship to Reform after Rishi Sunak's performance in tonight's leaders' debate with Sir Keir Starmer. Meanwhile, the Home Secretary has refused to clarify exactly how many migrant visas will be allowed each year after vowing to introduce an annual cap. The Conservatives are pledging to limit entry for those coming into the UK to work or to join family. Net migration levels, the difference between people leaving and arriving in the UK, are now 3 times higher than they were in 2019. Sir Keir says the Tories are responsible, but James Cleverly says their plan will strike a balance between the benefit and cost of migration.
If we are returned to government, we have committed to a scheme to cap the level of work-related visas. The Migration Advisory Committee will crunch the numbers to balance the economic needs of the country against the pressure on public services and suggest to the government a level.
Meanwhile, Labour's Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves and the Scottish Labour leader are on the election campaign trail in Scotland. Anas Sawar says people across the country are turning their backs on the Conservatives and the SNP.
Not a single vote's been cast in this general election campaign. Our feet are firmly on the ground. With hard work, humility and energy, we will still seek to earn people's trust, earn their support, so we make sure we can get rid of this Tory government and start the process of change for Scotland.
And a 25-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of assault after Nigel Farage had a milkshake thrown over him while campaigning in Essex. Following the incident, the Reform UK leader was photographed with the drink splattered over his suit as he boarded his campaign bus. Police officers also arrested a man on suspicion of assaulting an emergency worker at the same time. Both individuals, we understand, are now in custody and are being questioned by police. And major hospitals in London have declared a critical incident after a ransomware cyber attack led to the cancellation of operations and disruption to blood transfusions. King's College Hospital, Guy's and St Thomas's and primary care services in the capital, including the Royal Brompton, have all been affected by the incident. NHS officials said they're working with the National Cyber Security Centre to understand the impact of the attack. Those are the headlines. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on the screen, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now to look ahead to tonight's TV debate. I'm now joined by the Shadow Paymaster General, Jonathan Ashworth. Jonathan, welcome to the show. Always a delight. So they're queuing up the big showdown, just a matter of hours away. If you had the ear of Sir Keir, what would you advise him, to come out swinging?
Well, I think this is a really important moment to remind the country that after 14 years of chaos and decline with the Tories, that it's time for change, but also to demonstrate that we in the Labour Party have a plan to rebuild the country for the better, and that Keir has the strength to make the changes this country needs. He's changed the Labour Party, unrecognisable from where it was 5 years ago. He's shown that strength to change the Labour Party, and he'll show the strength to change the country. And I think that will contrast quite acutely with Rishi Sunak, who is weak as a Prime Minister, but has also allowed himself to be pushed around by his backbenchers and has made a scattergun, chaotic set of policy announcements in this campaign, costing billions, which he simply cannot explain how he will fund.
Jonathan, no doubt Rishi Sunak will be looking for some facts and figures, particularly around the area of immigration. It's going to be a huge issue at this election. Do you think Keir Starmer will have something concrete for us to go on?
Well, here's a fact and figure for Rishi Sunak. I think since he promised to stop the boats, 40,000 people have crossed the channel. So I'll be interested to see if Rishi Sunak will be using that fact in his presentation tonight. Look, we know that this is an important issue, and the British public want a government that takes it seriously. They don't want the failed gimmicks of Rishi Sunak, which is why we've talked about investing in proper border force security, using terrorist-style laws to go after the criminal gangs who smuggle people across the channel. But I don't think anybody listening to Rishi Sunak tonight will believe a word he says when he has abysmally failed to stop the boats, despite promising the country that he would do that.
Jonathan, you launched your Great British Energy campaign again today. The Confederation of British Businesses has written to Sir Keir Starmer urging him not to increase taxes on North Sea oil companies for fear of frightening them away and making us even more dependent on importing fossil fuels, something you pledged to do. What do you say to people who say that basically the Labour Party's policy on North Sea oil is to just stop oil?
Well, no, I would disagree with that particular characterisation of our policy. Obviously, we always listen very carefully to the voices of business. We're proud to be a pro-business party working closely with the business community and want to work hand in hand with the business community. But we do believe that we have to transition to clean energy sources because it will be good for business. It will cut energy bills and it will wean us off the international fossil fuels market, which has left us so damagingly exposed when, for example, Putin invades Ukraine and everyone's bill shoots up as a consequence. So we believe by pursuing this transition, not only do we cut energy bills for good, we also create thousands of good, well-paid jobs across the country. But of course, we will always listen carefully to business. We want to work hand in hand with business. We're a pro-business party.
And Jonathan, on the campaign trail earlier today, Nigel Farage was milkshaked by a woman who's been arrested for that crime. James Cleverly, Robert Jenrick from the Conservative parties have come out and said, while they disagree with Nigel Farage's politics, they are condemning of that attack. Would you like to add your name, Jonathan Ashworth, to the list of people condemning this attack on Nigel Farage today?
Yes, absolutely. It's disgraceful. It's absolutely disgraceful. Of course, I disagree with Nigel Farage and all kinds of things, but this is a democracy and politicians have the right to campaign, to speak to voters, to speak up on platforms. And the intimidation we're seeing of politicians and throwing milkshakes over politicians is absolutely disgraceful. And it was not so long ago that we've lost two very dear friends of mine who were politicians, from David Amos from the Conservative Party, Joe Cox from the Labour Party, who were murdered in our street. I mean, this behaviour is just utterly unacceptable. And I hope we do not see any more ugly episodes like this in the remaining weeks of the campaign.
Thank you, Jonathan Ashworth, Shadow Paymaster General for joining us. Putting politics to one side and agreeing we can all agree to condemn such attacks. Thank you for joining us on GB News. Always a pleasure to have you. Well, plenty more reaction to the election to come in just a moment, where I'll get a reaction from a Tory immigration minister. A cap has come out today, but how big is that cap? Let's try and find out.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules. Buckley still queues for the westbound M62 Huddersfield to Rushworth Moor Junction 23 to 22. Now there's barrier repairs ongoing there. They're in the middle of being completed, so we're still seeing long queues. Northbound M6 Middlewich at 18 up to Knutsford 19. Now still just one lane open in that 4-lane stretch, so 3 lanes are combed off for those emergency repairs. Takes about an hour and 20 minutes to get through the scene of that one at the moment. And then the A1M in North Yorkshire and Hertfordshire, firstly southbound, junction 44 York down towards the M1 at junction 43, 2 lanes shut, a 2-mile queue. That's at the scene of a collision. Northbound A1M, Welling at 6 up towards 7 Stevenage south, a lane shut in delays. That's for ongoing emergency barrier repairs there. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Joint CEO at the UK Sepsis Trust, Dr. Ron Daniels. Very good to see you this morning. Why is it with sepsis we sort of hear very little about it in day-to-day life until there's either a big story or a big tragedy? Why is that? Is it common?
Well, it's astonishing, isn't it? We have a condition here that affects nearly 250,000 people across the UK each year and claims 48,000 lives. And just for context, breast cancer, and I'm not diminishing how horrible that can be, claims 11,000 lives. So sepsis is 4 times more prolific as a killer. I think the reason we don't hear about it is because it doesn't really belong to any particular speciality of doctors. It touches every aspect of healthcare, and therefore there's no professional group to be championing it, which means it needs an advocacy organisation like ours.
My understanding is that it's when your own immune system starts to attack the tissues, but by the time people realise that their temperature isn't just flu or something, they can often be in quite a perilous state.
It arises in people of any age, people with whether or not they've got underlying illness, and it can arise as a consequence of any infection. So it presents hugely differently.
So what do we do?
If you're concerned something is devastatingly wrong, there are 6 key symptoms to look for, and they spell the word sepsis. S for slurred speech or confusion. E for extreme pain in the muscles or joints. P for passing no urine, no water in a day. S for severe breathlessness. I for it feels like I'm going to die, and people really do say that. And then the final S for skin that's mottled or discoloured or very pale. Any one of those 6 in the context of infection, it goes straight to A&E.
The People's Channel.
Welcome back, and I'm now joined by Michael Tomlinson, who's the Minister of State for Illegal Migration. Welcome to the show, Michael. A pleasure to have your company. So the Tory party came out fighting this morning, saying you're going to introduce migration caps on visas. We've been hearing this since 2010. David Cameron promised to get it down into the tens of thousands. How big is your cap this time?
Well, this is going to be a legal cap, and there will be a number that will be debated by Parliament and that will be set out thereafter in statute. And we're going to be advised by the independent expert body, the Migration Advisory Committee. They will consult businesses, they will consult organisations such as the NHS, and they will recommend a number to ministers, and that will then be put forward by the minister. It'll be up to the minister then to put that number forward and for it to be debated in Parliament. But Martin, the bottom line is the numbers have been too high. I agree, they have been too high. They've been down 10% in the last year. With the measures that the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary brought in, they would have been 300,000 fewer. That's moving in the right direction of travel, and that's part of the reason why we've announced this today.
Do you think it's fair to say, though, Michael, with all due respect, if you consult the NHS, if you consult businesses, public sectors of any form that want more labour to come in, that want cheap foreign labour, they won't ask for a cut. So what point is a cap if you don't know the size of it? It's just rhetoric, isn't it?
Well, that's not right, Martin, because actually it will be for the minister to decide. So just at the moment, I'm a Home Office minister. I receive advice on a daily, sometimes on an hourly basis. And I look at that advice. I agree with some, I challenge much, and I disagree with some. But at the end of the day, it's my decision as the minister. And we're saying loud and clear, the numbers have been too high. They're down 10%. That's moving in the right direction. There would have been 300,000 fewer. Again, that's moving in the right direction. But it'll be up to the minister to put that number before Parliament, up to Parliament then to debate it, and for then that to be in place for the annual cap. And that's the right process as far as I'm concerned.
But Parliament's dissolved. There is no Parliament, so you won't be able to debate this and get a number for this until after the election. Surely a better tactic, Michael, is to come out and say, we will cap it at the tens of thousands. We will actually listen to the electorate who've been saying in every election since 2010, we must have firm numbers. And, you know, despite the fact taking back control was the #1 slogan of the Brexit referendum, 2019, that general election to get Brexit done, 764,000 net arrivals last year, 2.5 million immigrants coming to Britain in the past 2 years. Isn't the truth of the matter is these caps are meaningless? Why should people trust anything the Conservative Party say on immigration and visa numbers anymore?
Well, Martin, that's not right. I agree with you that the numbers have been too high. But as I say, the numbers are down by 10%. Actually, part of this is, for example, because of schemes such as the Ukraine scheme, the Hong Kong scheme. And I believe that the British people are fundamentally welcoming. We're welcoming as a nation. But the trouble is, with the numbers being too high, with the numbers being as high as that risks undermining the very welcoming nature of our country. And that's why this debate is so important. That's why expressing that the numbers are too high in the first place is so important. Saying that we've got a plan to get them down, showing how we've already got them down by 10%. They would have been 300,000 fewer, as I say, under the schemes already introduced. And this is the right direction of travel, with an annual cap getting lower during the course of every year of the next Parliament. So you're right, it is a debate in the run-up to the general election. Actually, I think it's quite a healthy debate to be having. I'm very pleased that we're having a healthy and constructive debate about migration. That is right and proper. You'll remember the days when Keir Starmer said any discussion of this sort was racist, were utter nonsense. It is perfectly appropriate for there to be a robust and grown-up debate about migration. That's the conversation the Prime Minister and Home Secretary are leading today, and I'm delighted to be a part of it.
OK, superb. Thanks for joining me, Michael Tomlinson, Minister of State for Illegal Migration. Now, don't go anywhere. We're looking ahead to that big TV showdown between Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer later tonight. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It will turn brighter from the north into this afternoon, but it is going to turn considerably colder. And that's because we have got colder air from the north diving south and eastwards through this evening. So that will bring the brighter conditions to the north. But denoting the difference between that air is a cold front, and that will be bringing some cloud and rain to many southern and central areas of England and Wales through this evening. That will clear to the southeast overnight, and behind it, it will turn much brighter or clearer and drier for much of the UK. However, frequent showers will start to move in across northwestern areas, and it is going to be quite a chilly start to the day on Wednesday. We could see locally a grass frost, but I think most of us just down into the low single figures rurally. And that could mean it's cold enough for some snow showers to fall over the high ground of Scotland, above around 600 metres, and plenty of showers across much of Scotland as well, particularly across northwestern areas. Across eastern Scotland, it should be that much drier, and across Northern Ireland as well. Still some brightness, and eastern parts of northern England should see a fairly bright start to the day. But the best of the sunshine tomorrow morning will be across parts of southern England and the southeast as well, where it should stay fairly dry and bright through much of the day. However, it is going to be a bit of a fresher day. Some cloud will bubble up across southern and central areas into the afternoon. There is a risk of showers across parts of Wales and into the Midlands, but I think the greatest risk is definitely across parts of northwest Scotland, where there'll be quite frequent, heavy as well, and there's a risk of thunderstorms. Temperatures only reaching 11 or 12 degrees in the north, and a little bit cooler as well in the south, only highs of around 16 or 17 degrees, which is a few degrees cooler than today. So definitely a fresher day to come tomorrow, and potentially quite an unsettled one across northern areas. It'll stay unsettled into the evening across the parts of the northwest. The theme continues into Wednesday, into Thursday and Friday, but it does look a little bit drier and warmer into the weekend.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that. Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The People's
Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:52. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, could tonight's first TV debate between Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer be a critical point in the race for number 10? Well, as things stand, Labour is on course to win a landslide. According to the latest GB News People's poll, it sees 46% of the public voting for Labour, while 22% would vote Conservative. Well, joining me now is Sir John Curtis, polling expert and Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde. Always a delight to have you on the show, Sir John. You wrote a fascinating piece in today's Daily Telegraph, the headline of which is this: Nigel Farage's return is a disaster for the Tories. And that was before we announced earlier today that 6 candidates may defect from the Tories to the Reform Party. Can you spell out for us, please, why you wrote that headline?
Well, point number one is that Reform are primarily picking up people who voted Conservative in 2019. Indeed, more people who voted Conservative in 2019 are now switching to Reform than have switched to Labour. Now, of course, you might want to wonder whether or not some of those people, if Reform were not on the ballot paper, would otherwise have voted Labour, and therefore perhaps it's taking votes off Labour. Well, if we look at the evidence of the local elections last month and compare what happened in wards where Reform were on the ballot paper with those where they were not, it is very clear that the presence of Reform on the ballot paper hurt the Conservatives and did not hurt anybody else. So always round, it looks likely that Reform and their support is primarily costing the Conservatives. Now, it was already the case, and contrary to what I think the Conservatives were hoping, that the Reform vote was holding up. It's holding up at around 11%. I think it's just 10% in your poll. That's now pretty typical. It's not gone down during the election campaign. Nigel Farage's presence will, at least at minimum, make it more difficult for the Conservatives to squeeze that support, partly because Mr. Farage's charisma means he will attract attention and interest and help to keep the Reform in the headlines. But also because certainly hypothetical polling at least indicates that people have said they're somewhat more likely to vote for Reform if Mr. Farage is on the ballot paper. So always round, this doesn't look like good news for the Conservatives at all.
Now, Sir John, a lot of hopes seem to be pinned on tonight's TV debate, at least by the Conservatives. Historically, can these events sway the electorate in any significant way, or do you think people have basically made up their minds already?
Well, the one debate that did was the very first one we had back in 2010, when Nick Clegg performed extremely well, the then Liberal Democrat leader, outpointed Gordon Brown and David Cameron, and there was a quite substantial spike for Liberal Democrats in the polls. However, it did all rather disappear by polling day. Perhaps the reason why, at least in the short run, it had that effect is because voters were learning something new. Mr. Clegg wasn't that well known. He appeared actually to be something of an equal to his 2 better-known rivals. The question tonight is whether or not Rishi Sunak or Sir Keir Starmer can succeed in unveiling something either about themselves or about their opponents that voters didn't previously know that might cause them to change their minds. Or are we simply going to get a rather stale debate in which the now much rehearsed and oft-repeated lines that we've heard from both sides are simply articulated by the 2 party leaders?
OK, thank you very much, Sir John Curtis, polling expert and Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde. We're just a few hours away now to that huge debate. Will it make any difference? We had Alistair Stewart on the show, of course, the legend. He chaired that very first debate with Nick Clegg. Cleggmania ensued. Will Rishi Mania follow? He'll be hoping that's the case. On the way, we'll get much more reaction to that GBNews exclusive that 6 Tory candidates, including at least 1 former MP, could be set to join Nigel Farage's Reform Party. The worst news that Rishi Sunak will want ahead of that TV debate later on tonight. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. The A1M seeing delays in both directions. Southbound, firstly, junction 44 to 43, that's York down to the M1. There's a queue back to Boston Spa at junction 45, a lane shut at the scene of a collision. A lane shut northbound too in the A1M, well in up to Stevenage South, junction 6 to 7. Emergency barrier repairs continue and there's delays. Same story westbound in the M62, emergency repairs. It's slow from Huddersfield to Rushworth Moor, junction 23 to 22. Now just one lane open on the northbound M6 from Middlewich 18 up to Knutsford 19. There's a big queue back towards Sandbatcher 17 and delays on surrounding routes 2 for those emergency repairs. A breakdown eastbound M27, a lane shut and slow. Southampton Airport at 5 to 7 at Hedge End.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
It's the Great British Summer Giveaway, and have we got a prize for you? There's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, GB News can exclusively reveal that 6 Tory candidates are on the verge of sensationally defecting to the Reform Party. This spells a huge headache for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak ahead of tonight's first live TV debate. We'll bring you all of the inside story. And this comes as the Tories have today pledged to deliver what David Cameron promised in 2010, to finally cap legal immigration levels. But with migration levels rising, is this too little, too late? And all 27 European Union member states go to the polls later this week, starting on Thursday, in fact, with big gains expected for parties calling for stricter immigration controls and an end to punishing net zero policies. Whisper it. Could there be another Brexit in the air? And that's all coming up in your next hour. What's the show? Always a delight to have your company. A sensational exclusive coming up. It never rains, but it pours for Rishi Sunak, just a matter of hours away from that big TV debate. The blockbuster news, as many as 6 Conservative candidates could defect to Reform UK. This is the last thing that Rishi Sunak wants to hear. On the campaign trail today, Nigel Farage was milkshaked. A woman has been arrested for that. On today's show, we're joined by Jonathan Ashworth from the Labour Party, who condemned that attack, as did James Cleverly, as did Robert Jenrick. Coming together, putting their politics to one side. We cannot have those kind of attacks. Let me know your thoughts on that. Already hundreds of your says in about this political violence. Is it defining this campaign? How do we stamp it out? Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. But before all of that, it's your headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you and good evening to you. Well, the top story from the GB newsroom today is that Rishi Sunak's facing another blow in his general election campaign, as GB News can reveal that up to 6 Conservative candidates could switch to Reform UK. It follows Nigel Farage's decision yesterday to stand as a Reform candidate himself and lead the party. The candidates, including at least one former MP in the last Parliament, are in a race against time now to make up their minds before the nomination deadline on Friday. One of those is weighing up whether or not to jump to Reform UK and told GB News their mind could be made up by Rishi Sunak's performance in tonight's leadership debate with Sir Keir Starmer. Well, as you've been hearing, there have been 2 arrests, including one of a 25-year-old woman on suspicion of assault after Nigel Farage had a milkshake thrown over him in Essex. The Reform UK leader had been visiting a pub after speaking to a crowd earlier. Party chairman Richard Tice said they won't be bullied, while the Conservatives and Labour have both called it unacceptable. Meanwhile, the Home Secretary James Cleverly has gone on record as refusing to confirm the exact number on the cap the Conservatives would put on worker and family visas if they return to power. The party's pledging to limit entry for those coming to the UK, claiming it will see immigration fall each year over the next Parliament. Labour says the plan is meaningless, but James Cleverly insists it will strike a balance between the benefit and costs of migration.
If we are returned to government, we have committed to a scheme to cap the level of work-related visas. The Migration Advisory Committee will crunch the numbers to balance the economic needs of the country against the pressure on public services and suggest to the government a level.
James Cleverly. Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says the Conservatives are responsible for the rising number of migrants.
The Conservatives have let immigration get out of control. We've got record numbers of people coming to this country, and they've now said they're going to have a visa cap. They've not said what the number is, so they've got a visa cap without a cap. We did have a visa cap before. Rishi Sunak argued to get rid of it, which they did in 2020, and now they're going back to it but without a number. It is utter chaos.
Sir Keir Starmer. Well, more than 200 migrants arrived in the UK on small boats this morning. GB News can reveal 4 vessels made the journey from northern France after 63 people managed to cross yesterday. That takes the total number of illegal migrants who've arrived so far into the UK this year to more than 10,500. That's a 38% increase on the same period last year. Sir Ed Davey says his plan to invest in personal care will help to rescue the NHS, which he says is on its knees. The Lib Dems say they would introduce free day-to-day care in England for adults in need, including the elderly and disabled, and have pledged to increase carers' wages. They're also saying, as part of their election campaign, that the £3.7 billion cost of that social care plan will be met by reversing tax cuts for big banks. Well, Sir Ed Davey, who cares for his disabled son at home, says the investment will ultimately ease pressure on the National Health Service.
We need more people to be supported in care, to look after loved ones who are either waiting to be discharged from hospital or so they don't have to go into hospital. If we do that, we rescue our NHS. Our NHS is on its knees, and one of the main reasons it's on its knees is people haven't invested in social care and they haven't looked after family carers, and our package today does just that.
Let's bring you up to date then with what's happening in London and the major hospitals that have declared a critical incident after a cyber attack led to the cancellation of operations and blood transfusions. We're hearing that staff at King's College Hospital, Guy's and St Thomas's in London, including the Royal Brompton and their primary care services, have all been told their sites have been hit by this major IT incident. Some sources calling it a ransomware attack. Health trusts are now reporting the incident has had a major impact on the delivery of services, with blood transfusions particularly affected, and advising the public to contact their healthcare provider if their appointment has been cancelled. Now, British D-Day veterans have arrived in France to take part in commemorations marking the 80th anniversary of the Normandy landings. Around 24 former service personnel, all of whom are in their 90s or older, have been gathering to remember those who lost their lives. They're carrying with them a commemorative torch from the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, which will form the centrepiece of the vigil at the Bayeux War Cemetery tomorrow. George Chandler, who was on a torpedo boat on D-Day, told GB News how this affects him.
I was 19 at the time. These kids were younger than me, I know they were. Every time I talk to somebody about D-Day, I'm there.
George Chandler. Bit of sport for you, and world tennis #1 Novak Djokovic has been forced to pull out of the French Open. He has, we understand, a knee injury. The defending champion picked up the problem during his 5-set win over Argentina's Francisco Cerundolo yesterday. He was due to play Norway's Casper Ruud in a repeat of last year's Grand Slam final. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now let's get straight back to that GB News exclusive, which is that as many as 6 Tory candidates, including one who was an MP in the last Parliament, are on the verge of sensationally defecting to Reform UK ahead of Friday's deadline. Now, this comes ahead of the first televised debate of this year's general election campaign this evening, which could be Rishi Sunak's last chance to improve his party's flailing poll numbers. Let's get straight into this now with GB News' political editor, Christopher Hope, who broke this story this afternoon. Chris, the last thing Rishi Sunak wants to hear ahead of a huge event like tonight is a defection, a revolt in his ranks. Tell us more.
Well, that's right, Martin, and good evening. That's right. Well, I've been talking to people who are concerned about Nigel Farage becoming leader of Reform UK, standing in a seat at this general election campaign. Suddenly he's back front and centre to torment, and often torment, the Tory party. I know of at least one former MP in the last Parliament who's looking at defecting to Reform UK as soon as this week, by Friday, 4 p.m, when nominations must go in. A further 5 are thinking about it. If that were to happen, it would be a further blow to Rishi Sunak. He's already reeling from these very difficult polling figures, these mega polls. MRP polling has left him facing what looks like, all three agree, is going to be a 3-figure majority for the Labour Party on the July 4th election 1 month ago today. I think it's a worry for him, but little more they can do. He felt he probably had dealt with Nigel Farage, the threat, because when he called that election just barely 2 weeks ago, Farage immediately said, "I can't fight it, I'm not ready for it." Well, he's had his mind turned by meeting people in the Ship Inn in Wandsworth, for example. He told me yesterday on the weekend. Elsewhere around the country, they're saying, "Why aren't you standing? Why are you leaving us alone?" So he's now standing, and that means other Tory MPs are worried. They're looking at these former Tory MPs. Some candidates are saying, "Why on earth? What can you do about this, Rishi Sunak? It's an issue, a problem you've caused." Further complication since I last spoke to you at 3 o'clock, Martin. I've been texted by somebody who is talking to some of these rebels, and they make the point: why do they have to declare who they're going to stand for by 4 p.m. Friday when nominations close? Wouldn't it discombobulate the Tory party if they join the Reform Party after that date? And that would be too late to allow the Tory party to replace them with another candidate. It gets more and more complicated and more murky, but this is the business end of a general election campaign.
Chris, can I ask you about the milkshaking of Nigel Farage this afternoon? A woman, 25-year-old, has been arrested. Not the first time, of course, this happened to Nigel Farage. And in 2019, of course, during that EU election when he was milkshaked, Chris, you were there for that moment, weren't you? You were part of that campaign. You were reporting on it. Tell us, Nigel was pretty shook up by it, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's right. I was reminding myself, I've been around political journalism for quite a while. I was the only reporter for the Telegraph at the time on Nigel Farage's battle bus, the Brexit Party bus, Martin. I believe you were a candidate at the time in May 2019 at those EU elections. He had some Five Guys milkshake from the Cafe Five Guys thrown over him in Newcastle in Throckley, and he was immediately whisked onto the bottom of his big battle bus, saying a version of which you're seeing on the election trail today. He was really shaken. I mean, it might seem amusing to people on Twitter, social media. Come on, Nigel, it's only a milkshake or a pint of beer. But when you're Nigel Farage, you don't know what it is. It could be anything thrown over you. And I would ask, people, viewers, critics of Farage, to think about what it's like to have that happen, and you don't know what it is. And he is a target for people. And that's why I think you've seen across-the-board condemnation from James Cleverly to Yvette Cooper to Tory candidates, Labour candidates. They're all concerned. They know it could happen to them. It's not funny, and I think people should take it that seriously. Of course, we do know that the police in Essex are now taking it seriously and are holding someone at this time. But I think it is a really, when I was with him, you kind of think, well, it's only milkshake, Nigel. Come on, get over it. Well, it wasn't. It could be anything, and it's a shock of what it could be, I think, which is so a wake-up call, I think, for these candidates. I do hope it doesn't chill down this campaign. I think Farage deserves some credit. He's the first time I've seen any party leader be amongst ordinary people in an uncontrolled environment. So far we've seen Keir Starmer, we've seen Rishi Sunak be amongst workers with bosses wearing their work bibs or amongst party volunteers in a controlled environment. So the credit to Farage is this, that he's out there amongst ordinary people going to a pub, trying to meet the voters, right? And that deserves some credit.
Chris Hope, wise words, well spoken. Thank you very much. And of course, we're all eyes now on those TV debates later on. Thank you very much for joining us. And let's get back to the studio now, where I'm joined by the former Labour advisor, Matthew Larser. Matthew, thank you for hot-footing it in.
Always good to be with you, Martin.
And yourself, Captain. Now, I spoke to Jonathan Ashworth earlier, just before you came, and he joined
My former flatmate.
Really?
Absolutely.
Well, he joined in the condemnation of that Nigel Farage milkshake attack. He said, putting politics to one side, it has no place in politics.
Absolutely. I think Chris hit the nail on the head. As somebody who spent, most of the 2015 campaign pretty much every day on the road and months before that, you just don't know what's going to happen. And, absolutely, Nigel's a pretty robust figure, as we know, but you just don't know what it could be. It could be an acid attack. It could be something else. And, OK, it turns out it's a milkshake and somebody was just sort of thought there was a laugh. And it seems in this case, it wasn't even, she's saying it's not even particularly political. She didn't even go especially to hear Nigel. She just saw him and thought, flip it, I'll throw this at him. But, I think it's a really horrible thing. And in fact, there's been a report today which actually looked at candidates' experience in the local elections, which found that a huge number of candidates had been harassed. And this is people who are campaigning on a very local level. So, nothing like the profile of Nigel Farage. We can't have hate coming into our politics.
Too right. We can all concur on that. Now, let's look ahead to the big showdown tonight.
Absolutely.
With leaders, debate. We had Alistair Stewart on the show, and delighted to have him. He chaired, of course, the first one. I held him partly responsible for Cleggmania.
Yes, no.
Joking aside, it seems to be Rishi Sunak is the one who's itching for the fight here. He wanted 6 of these things to happen. He's expected to take a front foot. What do you think is going to happen tonight?
So I think that Rishi will be the livelier character, because Rishi is like a little terrier in these debates. But I think that Keir needs to use this as an opportunity to sell himself to the country. The public know Rishi better because he's the Prime Minister. They see him on the telly more often doing his prime ministerial thing, even though he hasn't been in office that long. Whereas Keir is not known so much as a person as Rishi is. So this is Keir's big opportunity. What I think Rishi needs to do is take a chill pill. Because do you remember in the leadership debates against Liz Truss, where he got so excited, he kept sort of speaking over her and got really aggressive, and I think that really damaged him. And maybe that's what was responsible for giving us Liz Truss as Prime Minister, because it certainly didn't do him any favours, even with Tory members. So you have to remember, it's not a sixth form debating society. It's about talking direct down the camera to the people at home.
As a Labour man yourself, you must concur Sir Keir Starmer's personality hasn't come through, if it exists. People are calling him Mr Magnolia, but is that actually part of his strategy? It's his to lose. All he wants to do is stay safe, not put a foot wrong, get through unscathed, and in that context, Matthew, might we expect to see a bit of a boring debate?
I hope not. I think that would be the wrong tactics to have given Keir. I think, I think if Rishi needs to take a chill pill, then Keir needs to take the opposite. He needs to take a bit of a pep pill because he needs to be at his liveliest. He can be. Sometimes, obviously, he gets nervous. He falls into loyally territory as a barrister for so long. You fall into that kind of loyally way of operating. But we need to see a bit of fire tonight. But what he shouldn't do is try and be what he's not. So he won't try and be Obama. He won't try and be Boris Johnson. He'll try and be himself, but perhaps himself at the less cautious end of his modus operandi. We need to see a little bit of sparkle, even, and a little bit of fight when he really cares passionately. But what you've got to remember, the key thing in all these debates is the clip is king. It's so easy to get carried away thinking it's like a school debate. It's all about, how it goes down in the hall. The ratings will be right down this year compared to previous years because they're not that big of characters, and also TV ratings go down. But millions will be watching in TV bulletins and, of course, on social media. So clip is king.
Can I quickly get your response to how you think Rishi Sunak might be feeling about this bombshell news of potentially 6 Tory candidates defecting to the Reform Party? Friday's a deadline. This is the last thing a political leader wants on their mind.
Absolutely, and especially wants on their mind when they're preparing for the debate. We've actually not seen them disappear, but when it was the 2010 debate, they disappeared for days. Peter Mandelson went and commandeered the battle bus and went and danced with some pensioners in Blackpool Tower. They were the best pictures of the 2010 campaign. And the last thing you want when you're kind of zoning in, you're doing your last prep, is to have even the threat of this, because the story is, if you're the Tories, it's all about the fact that you may slip into third place, and that's when the wheels start to come off your campaign. So it's literally the last thing they wanted. And as Chris says, it could even carry on, because if anybody defects before Friday, nominations close, they could even say that they're not a Tory afterwards. So the nightmare continues for Rishi.
Superb stuff. Matthew Larzer, as ever, thanks for joining us in the studio. Now, just to give you a reminder of those who have declared their candidacy in the constituency of Clacton so far, we have Jovan Owasu Nepal, who's from the Labour Party, Giles Watling, Conservative Party, Matthew Bensalem, Liberal Democrats, Nigel Farage, Reform UK, and Natasha Osborne from the Green Party. And the list of candidates isn't yet finalised, as the deadline isn't until later this week, in fact 4 p.m. Friday, as discussed. And when that time comes, it will be published on the GB News website once it is finalised. And just to repeat, GB News has extended an interview invitation to all of those candidates. If you're watching, please come on the show. I'd love to talk to you. Now, meanwhile, leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey, has been out campaigning in Cheadle today. His party has today pledged to provide free personal care to elderly and disabled patients in their own home if they are part of the next government.
Yeah, it's very close to my heart. I've been a carer most of my life, carer for my mum when she was terminally ill then. My gran looked after me, and I looked after my nana when she was frail, and now I look after my disabled son with my wife. And so I've sort of understand about how family carers are under pressure, because there are millions of families who are looking after their loved ones and they need more support. We also need to invest in social care. These are the care workers who are paid. We need to make sure they get a decent minimum wage, and we're saying £2 an hour above the national minimum wage at least, because we need more people to be supported in care, to look after loved ones who are either waiting to be discharged from hospital, or so they don't have to go into hospital. If we do that, we rescue our NHS. Our NHS is on its knees, and one of the main reasons it's on its knees is people haven't invested in social care and they haven't looked after family carers, and our package today does just that.
Of course, it's an interesting plan, but how much is it going to cost? How could it be funded?
Yeah, well, the personal care costs $2.7 billion a year, and the extra money for care workers would cost about $1 billion, so $3.7 billion. We're saying that the tax cuts to the big banks, which the Conservatives have given, should be reversed. That would raise £4.3 billion more than our policy. There are other aspects of it, and we think this is just an essential investment to save our NHS and to provide the care that people need.
Now, it's officially summer, and we've got a brand new summer giveaway. There's £15,000 in cash, tax-free, to make summer spectacular. A brand new iPhone, AirPods, and £500 tax-free to spend at the UK attraction of your choice. So if you like theme parks, visiting stately homes, or even a fancy Spa day out. This could all be on us at GB News. And here's all the details you need to enter.
It's the Great British Summer Giveaway, and have we got a prize for you? There's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction, so you can enjoy amazing days out this year. For a chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, don't go anywhere, because up next we'll be discussing whether we could be on the verge of another Brexit, as populist parties' support is expected to surge in the fast-approaching EU elections. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
What about the elections? Because it seems that the King and everything is moving because of it, and we've got a lot of royal engagements and things that happen at this time.
Yes, well, you know, it means that he has to take more time and be at home. He can't go to all the things he wants to do. He's been doing 5 a day, which is probably made Camilla a bit cross. But what they still hope is that they can get the Japanese Emperor and Empress over. That's in July. That they can go to France for the 80th anniversary of the fighting. And he will be able to do 1 or 2 things, and Ascot he's very keen to do. Now, those aren't things that are political in any way. Just want to talk about Harry and Charles's argument, where Harry said he didn't want to stay, he wanted to go to a hotel. And it's come out now that actually King Charles is believed that he was put into, offered St James's, and Princess Anne stays there and Beatrice stays there.
And this was for when Harry came over
when
for his 10th
yeah, exactly. And the policemen are wandering around with guns, and there's no chance of actually there being any problem there. So the fact that he said that it wasn't safe for him was not actually a very sensible thing to say, I don't think.
Well, he went to Nigeria, and that is, in the world ranking, it's ranked as quite a dangerous place.
Yes, one of the dangerous places in the world. But now Harry and Meghan have been invited to go to Ghana.
Oh, God. Well, it's interesting because my parents are from Ghana. I have Ghanaian heritage, and I'm thinking she'll probably then claim there's a percentage that she's Ghanaian as well. I'll be like, hang on a minute, you were Maltese, you're also Nigerian,
and
now
German,
you're going to say you're Ghanaian and German.
Yeah.
Come on. Thank you very much.
Squeeze it in.
Yeah, let's get them all in. Angela Levin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The People's Channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel. This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but actually, it's about you.
And we won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear
all sides
as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:26. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, the European Parliament elections are taking place this week from the 6th to the 9th of June, and polls show that Europe is facing a potential shift towards parties calling for stricter immigration controls and kicking back against net zero policies. Now, if right-wing parties win greater influence, it could significantly affect political dynamics within the EU and its policies abroad. Fascinating stuff, and it's my main topic of conversation now. I'm joined by the political journalist and the commentator, George Brzezinski. George, welcome to the studio. And elections taking place in Britain. There's also elections, 27 member states in the EU. Could we see a political realignment, the rise of the right?
Yes, Martin, thank you very much for having me. We will definitely see a shift to the right. It will not necessarily be an earthquake, but it will be a shift. There are key topics that are very important for people. It is the migration issues, where the emotions are running very high. It's defense and security, and net zero, and protecting the farmers. And all of these issues have a massive impact on the elections. And we will see a very different European Parliament, potentially with many right-wing voices being much louder and much more effective within the European Parliament.
And George, tell us about the particular countries that we should be keeping an eye on.
I think France and Italy are the most fascinating countries, because they, at the moment at least, they will really have an impact on how the European Parliament and the EU Commission will look in the future. It is Giorgia Meloni who is some sort of a kingmaker, or maybe a queenmaker at the moment. All eyes are on her, because for many months we could have heard now about rumours that she will create a new super party, a new right-wing super party, together with Le Pen and others, and that will have a massive impact on the EU, because it would be the second largest party. But these are just discussions. It is possibly unlikely that the super party will be formed. At least that's what my insiders tell me from Brussels. But they will have a very strong cooperation. And if ECR becomes the third largest group, together with ID, they may cooperate much more closely now after the AfD, the problematic Germans are gone out. We will have a very, very different continent, because Meloni is not just with the right-wingers. She also created a very strong channel of communication with Ursula von der Leyen. She speaks to EPP, and she's able to somehow bring everybody to the table.
And those acronyms there, they're groups of parties that form coalescences once they're inside the European Union. I know that from my term there. A lot of dealing goes on behind the scenes. But let's talk about something I find utterly fascinating. Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, Le Pen in France. They're appealing to younger voters, which goes against every kind of preconception we have. They're more right-wing, they should be older. And they're doing that, George, in very clever ways. Tell GB News viewers about why younger people are swinging towards the right. What policies are being dangled their way that are making them swing?
So, as I mentioned, migration is one of the key topics for a lot of people in Europe. And people notice how migration also has an impact on housing and on all other issues. If you can't get a good mortgage rate, if you can't find a house so easily, it is perhaps because the populations everywhere are going up and up. So people have connected these dots and started speaking about it. That's why a lot of the European right-wing parties, they came up with policies that wouldn't be typical free market capitalist policies. They would be policies to help younger people to find their first flat, to sort of get onto the market. They target unemployment. It's sometimes a very strange hybrid between some free market policies and some policies that would be considered socialist. So a lot of these parties in France, in Italy, have came up with new ideas, and they get massive support amongst a lot of young people.
And what's fascinating about it, in France, for example, Le Pen's party offered tax breaks, removal of tax for those under 30, free cheaper student accommodation, affordable housing, cutting down immigration. The same in the Netherlands, the same in Italy. We've seen a huge shift. 32% of French voters aged 18 to 24 are going to vote for a national rally. In Britain, 43% of the same demographic vote for the Labour Party. Britain is left-wing. Europe is increasingly going to the right. Fascinating week ahead, and the results are due out on Monday.
Soon, yes.
Results out Monday. We'll, of course, keep you fully up to speed on those as they come in here on GB News. Thanks for joining us, journalist and commentator George Brzezinski. Fascinating stuff. Please come back. What an excellent guest. There's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including airline chiefs who are calling for a booze ban on long-haul flights after a medical report claimed alcohol consumption and cabin pressure could lead to an increase in heart attacks. Is this a sensible precaution, or is it mile-high nanny state nonsense? Don't go anywhere. But first, did you...
The top stories this hour. Rishi Sunak's facing another blow in his general election campaign, as GB News can reveal that up to 6 Conservative candidates could switch to Reform UK. And that follows Nigel Farage's decision to stand as a Reform candidate himself in Clacton-on-Sea in Essex, as well as leading the party. The candidates, including at least one former MP in the last Parliament, are in a race against time, though, to make up their minds before the nomination deadline on Friday. One of the candidates is weighing up whether or not to jump ship to Reform, and possibly that their mind could be made up by Rishi Sunak's performance in tonight's leadership debate with Sir Keir Starmer. Also in the news today, a 25-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of throwing a milkshake over Nigel Farage. The Reform UK leader's been campaigning in Essex, saying the Conservatives should pay a big price for betraying the promises of Brexit. And the Conservative and Labour parties have both condemned that incident involving Nigel Farage. It comes just hours before we see Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the first televised debate of the general election campaign this evening. The Liberal Democrats have been campaigning on social care, while the Home Secretary James Cleverly says a future Conservative government would give MPs a vote on the number of migrants who'll be allowed UK visas. In other news, operations and blood transfusions have been cancelled at a number of major NHS hospitals in London after a cyber attack struck an IT service provider. Staff at King's College Hospital and Guy's and St Thomas's, including the Royal Brompton and their primary care services, have been told that their sites have been hit by a major incident, some sources calling that a ransomware attack. And world tennis number 1 Novak Djokovic has been forced to pull out of the French Open. He's got a knee injury. The defending champion picked up the problem during his 5-set win over Argentina's Francisco Cerundolo yesterday. He was due to play Norway's Casper Ruud in a repeat of last year's Grand Slam final. That's the latest news. Sign up for GB News alerts by scanning the QR code on the screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Quick look at the numbers for you today, and the market's looking like this. The pound buying you $1.2791 and €1.1754. The price of gold is £1,818 and 3 pence an ounce. And the FTSE 100 has closed for the day today at £8,232.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Polly Middlehurst, and also thank you to everyone who's got in touch with me today. I'll be getting through a load of those emails shortly. And if you don't know yet how to get in touch, here's Bev Turner with all of the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/your say.
The latest GB News travel. Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long delays heading south through North Yorkshire continue on the A1M. Now, one lane remains closed, the outside lane on that four-lane stretch, coned off junction 44 to 43 as you head away from the York turn-off towards the M1 following an accident. Long queues continue, I'm afraid, heading north through Cheshire. The M6 is down to a single lane, junction 18 to 19, that's Middlewich to Knutsford. Emergency repair works are still underway after 5 lorries were involved in an accident in the early hours this morning, taking well over an hour and a half, and the queues all the way back to 17 at Sandbach and on surrounding routes. The northbound entry slip road remains shut at junction 18 as well. In Hertfordshire, further down on the A1M, the lane's closed northbound 6 to 7, about a mile north of the Welland bypass for emergency barrier Pez, and trains are suspended in southwest London between Strawberry Hill and Wimbledon. It's problems to signal southwestern say. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
How can we have Britain's Got Talent? A British girl did win.
Yes.
This weekend.
Christmas, her name is.
Yes, Sydney Christmas.
Sydney Christmas.
She's a singer.
Yeah.
I'm guessing she's going to have a Christmas single out.
She's a cruise ship singer, and she works in a gym.
First woman to win in 9 years.
Yeah. I mean, I don't watch it anymore.
But some people clearly do. But apparently 5 of the last in the final were not British born or even live here.
Outrageous.
I know. So why call it Britain's Got Talent?
I know.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
It sums up as well this difference between the British public and most people on the telly.
Yeah.
Because the judges do not notice this lack of British involvement in, or at least if they do notice it, they're not saying anything about it. But the viewers notice the imbalance, and just 4 of the foreign acts made it through to the final in the end. There was a patriotic protest in London on Saturdays, it was described. There was hundreds of thousands of people there. There were Students Against Tyranny were there. There was Tommy Robinson was there, much maligned, divisive figure. But these people would say, we are feeling the need to walk on the streets of this country because we no longer feel we can assert our British identity.
Well, I mean, I think there's a difference between patriotism and xenophobia. And I think patriotism is great, and people like to feel a sense of identity, they feel a sense of belonging, you know, they understand what their flag is for, and they kind of, British values, which we all adhere to. And then there's xenophobia, which is sort of, we hate anyone who's not British. So I think I think that march that we saw at the weekend was actually quite patriotic. I don't think it was xenophobic at all. I think it was a nice sort of... They all seemed very kind of peaceful. And there wasn't any horrible rhetoric or anything like that. Certainly much less horrible rhetoric than we're used to seeing from the pro-Palestinian marches.
The People's Channel.
Earlier on Breakfast, Nigel Farage has shaken the campaign up, announcing he will stand for Reform UK.
Our reaction was just get on with the job, keep going. It's an election. Anyone's entitled to stand anywhere.
A vote for reform is exactly what Keir Starmer wants people to do if they're not going to vote Labour.
The ferry that's carrying 30 of those veterans for that trip across to Normandy.
Joined by perhaps my favourite ever guest. This is Noah. Noah is here with us in Arromanch. What an absolute delight he is. He's wearing his D-Day commemorative T-shirt, and we are sat in a replica Jeep.
From 6, it's Breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. I'm Martin Daubney. It is 6:20. This is GB News. Now, welcome back. Let's get stuck in. Could we be witnessing the end to a tipple on our long-haul flights? Well, according to a new study conducted by German scientists, the consumption of alcoholic beverages in flight, combined with low cabin pressure at cruising altitude, may put a strain on sleeping passengers' hearts. Well, joining us now to discuss this is the comedian Diane Spencer. Diane, welcome to the show. I don't know about you, but as far as I'm concerned, it's my God-given right to put my claw around an ice-cold G&T the very first moment you're allowed to on a flight. The fact a few people are having heart attacks because they have pre-existing health conditions, surely that's their issue. We should not be banning booze for those of us who enjoy a responsible tipple.
I love the fact, Martin, that you say God-given right whilst you are technically flying, which is something that was not really a God-given thing. But I actually agree with you completely. I think that, number one, you definitely need a drink when you board a plane because it can be the beginning of your holiday. It can be that exciting moment where you release yourself. Number two, there will be children on board, and I think it just makes the journey a bit smoother when other people have babies and you have a glass of red wine. I appreciate what they're trying to say, but did you notice in this article that actually they've released this information in Dubai? And as we all know, Dubai does not exactly encourage drinking in public. In fact, it is illegal. So I'm kind of guessing that when they're releasing this information, they are sort of pandering to their hosts. And I agree with you. I think that other people, they do know that they have pre-existing conditions. Can't we just have a sign on it like you have on a roller coaster? You know, I mean, we already have like warnings all over other things like fag packets. I'm sure that at some point we're going to have warnings on chocolate and very sugary things. Why don't we just have a warning on a bit of booze in a plane? You know, don't go to 35,000 feet and do a vodka Red Bull if you think you have an existing heart condition.
See, that would be eminently sensible. You know, if you have a dodgy ticker, don't get on the booze on a flight. That's down to you. Why should the vast majority of people suffer for the poor decisions of a few? And anyway, Diane, when you look at this report, it doesn't actually tell us how many people have heart attacks on flights. All it tells us that 7% of in-flight medical emergencies are circulatory problems. It doesn't tell us how many. I've taken hundreds of flights in my life. No one's ever had a heart attack.
No, I mean, and that does, if you look at it the other way, that means that 93% of in-flight medical conditions are something else. What are they? They could be anything. Allergic reaction, perhaps. Who knows? But no, I think it's a bit much. And I do wonder whether it's a clash between the airlines and the airports, because the airlines always kind of frown on the airports because they're international space, they get to sell lots of booze. And, you know, a lot of the time people are flying because they're on holiday or they're going for work. And it's nice to have like a little G&T and get your buzz above the clouds. But the airlines don't like the fact that then people drink too much in the airport. Then they get on the plane and then there are issues. But banning booze for the rest of us, because there's a small minority, I mean, you're just sucking the fun out of it. And I absolutely love flying. Now, answer me this, Martin. Do you think that they would not serve champagne in first class?
No, of course they wouldn't, because the well-heeled passengers would simply never have the rules applied to them. It's one rule for them and it's one rule for us. And as far as I'm concerned, Diane, it's always lunchtime in an airport. Diane Spencer, thank you very much for joining us on the show. It's always a delight to have your company. Now, don't go anywhere, because up next I'll be getting all your comments. And if you haven't sent those in, then please get them to me by going to gbnews.com/yoursay.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It will turn brighter from the north into this afternoon, but it is going to turn considerably colder. And that's because we have got colder air from the north diving south and eastwards through this evening. So that will bring the brighter conditions to the north. But denoting the difference between that air is a cold front, and that will be bringing some cloud and rain to many southern and central areas of England and Wales through this evening. That will clear to the southeast overnight, and behind it, it will turn much brighter or clearer and drier for much of the UK. However, frequent showers will start to move in across northwestern areas, and it is going to be quite a chilly start to the day on Wednesday. We could see locally a grass frost, but I think most of us just down into the low single figures rurally. And that could mean it's cold enough for some snow showers to fall over the high ground of Scotland, above around 600 metres, and plenty of showers across much of Scotland as well, particularly across northwestern areas. Across eastern Scotland, it should be that much drier, and across Northern Ireland as well. Still some brightness, and eastern parts of northern England should see a fairly bright start to the day. But the best of the sunshine tomorrow morning will be across parts of southern England and the southeast as well, where it should stay fairly dry and bright through much of the day. However, it is going to be a bit of a fresher day. Some cloud will bubble up across southern and central areas into the afternoon. There is a risk of showers across parts of Wales and into the Midlands, but I think the greatest risk is definitely across parts of northwest Scotland, where there'll be quite frequent heavy as well, and there's a risk of thunderstorms. Temperatures only reaching 11 or 12 degrees in the north and a little bit cooler as well in the south, only highs of around 16 or 17 degrees, which is a few degrees cooler than today. So definitely a fresher day to come tomorrow, and potentially quite an unsettled one across northern areas. It'll stay unsettled into the evening across the parts of the northwest. The theme continues into Wednesday, into Thursday and Friday, but it does look a little bit drier and warmer into the weekend.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
Yeah, for dartball practice.
Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but actually it's about you.
And we won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear
all sides
as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on. Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's approaching 5:48. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. We're on the final furlong of today's show. Now, this week, of course, marks 80 years on from D-Day in Normandy on June the 6th, 1944. The actions of the brave armed forces on that day ultimately liberated Western Europe, defeated Nazi Germany and ended the Second World War. Our reporter Anna Riley spoke to a Yorkshire D-Day veteran about his part in this pivotal moment in world history.
Say it was a Boy Scouts adventure to me as an 18-year-old. Never been on a beach before, never been on a ship before.
98-year-old veteran Ken Cook shared his memories of D-Day at a special event in Harrogate. As a former Green Howards private, Ken was part of an armada of vessels carrying more than 150,000 Allied soldiers to France. And he was just a teenager when his regiment landed on Gold Beach in Normandy.
Everybody was telling us, the officers and the sergeants, corporals, they're telling us, get off the beach, lads, quick, because there's some more stuff coming behind us. And they had to get onto the beach as well. All our equipment and tanks and whatever, artillery, they were following up behind us, so we had to get out of the way and get into the countryside and make as much ground as we could on that first day.
Never in military history has any campaign been so long anticipated, so much discussed, so thoroughly organised as the Second Front.
Ken survived that harrowing first day, but many didn't. Around 10,000 Allied troops were either killed or injured. But their sacrifice, along with the bravery of those that lived, changed the course of history and resulted in the end of World War II.
I'm quite proud of it. I took part to, get rid of the terrors that were in Germany and that, because somebody had to do it, and so we did it. We did our job, and that's it.
Ken is one of the last surviving members of York's Normandy veterans. Part of an ever-dwindling band of brothers who fought on D-Day, he's attending the 80th commemoration in France.
A very emotional occasion this time because there's not many of us left now. So we've got to make the most of it, and, you know, we've got to see our friends who are still over there. And that's the main reason we're going. We think it'll be the last. It might not be, depends. If I keep taking the tablets, I'll be going in 85th.
Remembering the fallen, Ken's wish is that long after he's gone, we still never forget those who gave their tomorrow for our today. Anna Riley, GB News, Harrogate.
That's a magnificent package, and it's worth remembering that the 75th anniversary of D-Day, around about 250 British veterans went over. The 80th anniversary this week, only 23 have gone over. So this is a very, very precious moment to remember those last surviving heroes of D-Day. And I've got an email on that, you'll say, on Tessa Dunlop's report. We did a report on Bletchley Park earlier on, and Judy says this: how wonderful to see Ruth so sharp and bright and enjoying her amazing achievements during the Second World War and what she did to secure our freedoms. I cannot thank these incredibly smart ladies enough. Thank goodness for their unique talents and that they were not wasted. We had loads of emails on Sir Keir Starmer and his energy policy. A lot of you don't think much of his Great British energy policy. This, Labour and the Tories always talk big. We will do. Then in power, they do nothing. Things can only get worse. And on Starmer's energy policy, Gerald says this: Labour's policy on North Sea oil seems like madness. It supplies about 75% of our present oil and gas, and that means we have to buy it elsewhere. We will need huge quantities until 2050 and beyond. And Cassie adds this: the oil companies will not invest as much if they are taxed too heavily by the Labour Party, and that is their problem. They see pound signs in successful companies, tax them to the hilt, and then wonder why the money dries up. And on the incident of Nigel Farage, he was milkshaked earlier on the campaign trail. A woman aged 25 has been arrested on a charge of assault, and a second man was arrested for assaulting an emergency worker. People across the political spectrum have condemned this action today. Jonathan Ashworth came on the show. James Cleverly, Robert Jenrick all said this has no place in politics. And you guys out there, well, you agree. Gerald says this: those chucking milkshakes over politicians should be jailed as a deterrent to others. Well, as I said, that woman has been arrested on a charge of assault. And Ian says this: Nigel Farage being milkshaked will only improve his chances of winning. Ian, I remember during the 2019 campaign trail, 5 years ago this week when the Brexit Party was campaigning, Nigel Farage was milkshaked up north. It actually, he said, was the best thing that happened during that campaign trail, because the next day it was the front page of every newspaper in Britain. So perhaps it had a silver lining. Now, that's all from me for now, but of course, Jubes & Co is up next from 6 till 7. Don't forget to join us from 6 a.m. tomorrow. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel, followed by Britain's Newsroom at 9:30 with Andrew and Bev. And then Tom and Emily with Good Afternoon Britain from 12 o'clock. Then it's My Ugly Mush. I'm back at 3 tomorrow. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Thanks for all your company, and including that huge exclusive on 6 potential candidates defecting from Tories to Reform. A great story by Chris Hope. Now it's your weather, and it's Annie Shuttleworth.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It will turn brighter from the north into this afternoon, but it is going to turn considerably colder. And that's because we have got colder air from the north diving south and eastwards through this evening. So that will bring the brighter conditions to the north. But denoting the difference between that air is a cold front, and that will be bringing some cloud and rain to many southern and central areas of England and Wales through this evening. That will clear to the southeast overnight, and behind it, it will turn much brighter or clearer and drier for much of the UK. However, frequent showers will start to move in across northwestern areas, and it is going to be quite a chilly start to the day on Wednesday. We could see locally a grass frost, but I think most of us just